Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And welcome to another edition of Professor Wacker and Professor Cushman back in session. And we have got a very exciting episode in store for you guys today, as we are going to be grading the Formula One drivers 2020 campaigns. Very excited for this one. We did a NASCAR one about a month or so ago, and it turned out pretty well. We're pretty happy with the end product with that. So we're bringing it back once again for Formula One. And we also have some very interesting news from the Red Bull side of things in Formula One as well to discuss in today's episode. But before we get into that, how are you doing today, Kyle? As we've got plenty to discuss today with we're back in session. We've got the red marker back.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. The last one we did was a ton of fun. Excited to put the teacher cap back on and hand out some grades. I don't know yet. I don't know if I'm feeling more generous or more harsh from the last one. We'll have to see how things play out.
Yeah, if you didn't catch the last time we did this, I was definitely a little bit more generous with the marking. So you kind of would want me as a professor, maybe a little bit more if you're a student. But Kyle and I were in the same ballpark for the majority of it. We were within the same letter grade for about 85% of the marks, but then some of them we were a little bit different opinionated on. And that's a great thing. We don't always want it to be the exact same. That's what makes this show so entertaining. So we probably will have something similar today, maybe a little bit closer because we do have less drivers to discuss with only 22, 23 drivers, I guess it is. We've got a couple of extra ones that we're adding in for the fill-in drivers that miraculously showed up on the grid. It is 2020, so I'm not surprised that we have more than 20 drivers to grade, but we're making sure that we're adding everybody that sat in a Formula One cockpit this season, getting their due diligence and getting a grade for their 2020 season. So stay tuned for that a little bit later on in the episode, but we can start off today's show with Red Bull and wow, what a move they're going to be making. It is widely speculated. It has not been officially announced as of when we were recording this, but probably by the time we put this up, this episode up, it will be confirmed, as it is expected to be Sergio Perez partnering Max Verstappen over at Red Bull Racing in 2021, replacing Alexander Albon. Wow. I mean, this storyline has just taken so many different timelines and approaches throughout the past month or so. I mean, it's been in speculation, but it always seemed a little bit far-fetched that Sergio Perez could take over from a Red Bull junior driver, which they rarely do in the Red Bull program because they have such a prolific junior program that pumps out talent like nobody's business. And Sergio Perez would be totally wavering and differing from their previous strategies that we've seen with Sebastian Vettel, Daniil Ricciardo, Max Verstappen. These guys have all come up through the Red Bull junior program and have made their way up to the top tier team. This would be the exact opposite, as Perez has gone from a couple of different teams, McLaren, Racing Point, Force India, however you want to call it, and he's been in line for a top flight ride for a couple of seasons. He was touted maybe as the replacement to Kimi Raikkonen a couple of seasons ago before Charles Leclerc emergence in Formula One. So he never got that big break for a top three team that was then with Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. And it seems like his time has finally come. And unfortunately, it's going to come at the expense of Alexander Albon, who has underperformed. It's been widely reported on and talked about in the paddock and in the media that he hasn't been anywhere close to what Red Bull is expecting to be from a teammate to Max Verstappen. And saying that, Max Verstappen does carry that car quite a bit up the grid, probably from where it should be, and it is built to drive for Verstappen's kind of driving style. So it is always going to be a challenge for that second driver to compete against someone as talented and I guess really a young prospect, I guess, in Formula One and Verstappen. And Perez is going to be the veteran in that team now. And I'm very, very excited for this move, but I'm just a little bit disappointed as well for Alexander Albon. He's not going to be in F1 next season, as we've got a storyline we'll talk about after this one that fills that AlphaTauri seat as well. So it looks like Albon will be the test/reserve driver for next season for Red Bull. So that's quite the step down from going from the second best team on the grid in Red Bull to just being on the sidelines for the majority of the season. But what a storyline here, Kyle. We've got Sergio Perez staying in Formula One, something that we may not have seen coming, but he's definitely deserved it.
Yeah, I really did not think that this was coming at this point. All signs pointed towards Albon staying in that seat. And I really don't know what's changed in the minds of Red Bull and the people in power there to make this decision. And of course, it's not official yet, and it would be definitely something if all these reports come out and it's still Albon, but it seems extremely unlikely that that's the case now. But Red Bull is such a fascinating team because they are so hard-rooted in that junior program that they've built up. And just look at the names on the resume there, and you can see why. But at this point, they've lost out on a couple of drivers that came through the program that would be excellent number twos in that situation. Obviously, the first one is Daniel Ricciardo, who made the decision to leave and try to lead a team himself. And we'll see how that plays out going into McLaren. The first bet didn't work out with Renault. We'll see if the second one does with McLaren. And then the other one is also now a former McLaren driver, and Carlos Sainz, which people forget, was a Red Bull Junior driver, drove for Toro Rosso before going on to Renault and then McLaren as well. So kind of funny how the two parallels are there between Ricciardo and Sainz. But since then, it's been that kind of revolving door, and even, since then, essentially, and even before that a little bit. So you have Daniil Kvyat and everything that happened there, and then losing his seat, and then coming back with AlphaTauri and now being out again. He was never really an option. Alexander Albon, we've seen what he's done to this point. This year was extremely disappointing, even though the end of last season in 2019 was promising, and then Pierre Gasly, who only got half a season and underperformed there. So it's just been a big hindrance for Red Bull as a team to not really have that dependable second driver for when Verstappen either has a DNF or isn't performing up to his usual standard. They haven't had a second driver that they can lean on to either get big points or take advantage of positions that have been created and available to them. And in Sergio Perez, that's a driver that they're getting here. He's one of the most consistent and most solid drivers on the grid. He hasn't had an opportunity to race for a top team that is, I guess in Red Bull's case, you would say championship quality, or at least top three quality in terms of driver standings. Certainly the second best team on the grid right now. The best team he's ever raced for has finished fourth in constructors. And if this move does become official, he's stepping into the second best car on the grid. And that's something I cannot wait to see. Sergio Perez has been one of the most underrated drivers on the grid for a very long time now. Everyone knows him as a master of tire management, but now we're going to see him in a situation where he can maximize on his raw pace as well. And I cannot wait to see that, because I think it's also a situation where you're at a point where you're Red Bull and you need somebody to push Max Verstappen at this point of his career as well. You could kind of see this season where he kind of got disinterested a little bit, just because it was, for a lot of the season, beating Lewis Hamilton or the Mercedes in general just wasn't something that was realistic all that often. And then there was such a big gap to everybody else that it was just kind of him in third place, to the point where he made the joke at the last press conference where he kind of tried to steal the third place chair because he'd been sitting in it so often. And having somebody like Sergio Perez come in, if he can perform like he has in the past, and certainly you would imagine he would continue to do so at this point of his career, that's somebody that can push Max Verstappen as well to reach those next levels, to continue pushing up the grid and continue challenging the Mercedes. So I think that this was the right decision. It's unfortunate for Albon. I do think he has potential still, but he just didn't maximize on what he needed to do this season to keep that seat. And when somebody like Sergio Perez has a season like he has, he's available for you suddenly, which is something that you didn't expect. And he's basically the only or you're the only option that he has to remain in the sport in 2021 as well. It just kind of seems like things have played out perfectly for Perez. And for Red Bull, it's also played out in a situation where they've come to realize that this is kind of something that they need to go with going into next season. And down the road, we'll see what happens. I'm sure when one of Yuki Tsunoda, maybe Pierre Gasly gets a jump up again, maybe Albon gets it again, or maybe we're looking way down the road and somebody like Yuri Vips or something like that ends up getting that second seat. We'll see another Red Bull junior driver get that seat eventually. But for now, I think it's the perfect time and the perfect move to make for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just very interesting by Red Bull what they're doing here, because we've seen Verstappen in the past when he has a competitive teammate, how that kind of relationship is. You know, we saw it with Ricciardo, and we saw it in the Netflix series Drive to Survive, that it was a little bit, you know, there's a little bit of tension between the two, because, you know, Verstappen always wanted to one-up his teammate, and then they always felt kind of second best to Verstappen because it is his team. But when you have a prolific name like Perez coming in there next season, you have to kind of cater to him as well. You can't just make it the Max show, because that's not what Perez is signing up for. He's not coming over there to be the second guy. It's more like a 1A, 1B kind of thing. It can't be such of a differing performance between the two teams. But I mean, that's all going to have to be taken into consideration. But this does make it a lot more challenging for a team like Mercedes next season. In all likelihood, that Red Bull is going to be second, and they have two challenging cars, most likely two challenging cars with two capable drivers behind the wheel. Not to say that Albon isn't. We've just seen that he hasn't had the speed to keep up with Verstappen on a consistent basis. And this, with putting Perez in that car, they can really split the strategies next season and make Mercedes' life very difficult. And that's great for the championship. We don't want to see a runaway. As much as we have talked about in this show, where we are in awe of Lewis Hamilton's brilliance behind the wheel of a car, I mean, at some point in time, it's going to be passing on the torch to somebody else. And if we can see a competitive battle before Hamilton hangs up the steering wheel with Max Verstappen for a championship, or vice versa with someone like even Perez, let's not think that Perez is not going to maybe pass Verstappen next season in standings, because he's done that basically in every team that he's been. He's outqualified his teammate regularly. So it's going to be quite the challenge for Verstappen to try and continue this torrid pace that he's been on in his very young and successful F1 career thus far. So I'm excited for the move. It's very unfortunate for Albon that he doesn't even get to race in Formula One most likely next season, with Yuki Tsunoda moving up, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And he just kind of falls onto the sidelines and waits for his next opportunity. And it's, I mean, you think for Albon, he replaces Pierre Gasly last season, and he's got the ride of his life here. In his first year in Formula One, he's in one of the top cars in the sport. And then now he's on the sidelines, and Pierre Gasly has won a race this season for a car that he was kind of replaced in. So, I mean, the emotions for Albon and Gasly and Perez these past couple of seasons have just been a whirlwind, a roller coaster. I mean, the analogies you can go on, whatever you want to say. It's just been so up and down for all three of those guys. And Perez is just that win must have really sealed the deal, because before the Secure Grand Prix, it seemed like it was going to be Albon's seat. And even coming into Abu Dhabi after he won the race, it didn't seem like Albon was on the way out. It seemed like Perez was very content with, you know, maybe taking that year off, and he's got something lined up for 2022. But I think Helmut Marko and Christian Horner have really stepped up to the plate here and have been pushing the Red Bull execs that they really want a guy that can really push that team to the next level. And if they compete with Mercedes and make that constructors battle even more tight, because it's barely anything really, it's not really a fight for the top two, it's just Mercedes having a stranglehold. If we can get a competitive championship battle next season in the final year of this current era of car, I mean, we're set for one heck of a season with all the driver transfers that we've had this season already that have been announced for next year. This 2021 season in all motorsports, but specifically Formula One, is shaping up to be something like we haven't seen in a very, very long time, with the young talent coming in, the already established drivers moving around, finding a new place. Like, this is going to be one heck of a season. But this Perez move really gets the whole grid now in place. Lewis Hamilton is expected to sign a contract here in the next couple of days before Christmas. So he'll be back in Formula One for Mercedes next season. This Red Bull seat was the only thing that was left to be confirmed after the Tsunoda deal. And, I mean, they left it late. They're leaving it before Christmas, but they did say that they were going to leave it before Christmas. So I'm very, very excited for this move for Perez. I am very eager to watch Verstappen next season, because I think that's going to be the telltale sign if it's going to be a working relationship with him and Perez. And then for Albon, he's just got to stay on it. He can't give up now. This can't be – it's going to deter his confidence, of course. It's a natural kind of reaction to a move like this, where you go from such a high, really, in one of the best cars in Formula One, one of the fastest cars Formula One has ever seen, to being on the sidelines for next season and just testing the car to make it better for somebody else to drive the car that you were in the season prior. It's going to be a bit of a hollow feeling for Albon for sure, but I hope he stays with it. Of course, he's got a lot of talent, and there's no one denying that. It's just he hasn't, I guess, led up to those expectations, or lived up to those expectations that we kind of put on him at the end of the last season. Like you said, he performed pretty well, admirably last season. He got, I think, I don't know if he passed Gasly in the standings or not, but he was right there with him in 2019.
Close, right there to the end.
Yeah, so I don't know if he quite got him, because Gasly had a very good end of the season with AlphaTauri, so or I guess right. Toro Rosso then. But
that's one in the jar, I guess you could say.
Well, I caught myself. Yeah. Or whatever. But very, very interesting stuff from Red Bull, just all around, because they announced the Tsunoda deal before this move is going to happen. So it really just negated the entire possibility of Albon even falling back to AlphaTauri, and maybe Tsunoda is the reserve driver / test driver that Albon is going to be most likely next season for Red Bull. So very fascinating move, a bold move by Red Bull, something that we don't usually see from a team like this. It's just crazy that the past couple of weeks, how quickly things can change in Formula One. And there was encouraging signs in the paddock when you watch the videos and stuff like that from like Ted Kravis in his notebook section, or even Will Buxton in his post race, kind of stuff that he does. It seemed like they had heard some rumblings that there could be movement, but they all kind of thought it would be for nothing. And I mean, I guess they were getting told the truth in reality here. So we're anticipating that announcement tomorrow sometime, is what's being reported. Probably the last big move of the Formula One season before Hamilton signs, really. And then we're set for 2021 and their grid, most likely. We'll talk about one other person a little bit later on. But, thoughts on this entire move, Kyle? I mean, there's so many different variables to this that really shape up 2021 to be a spectacular season for Red Bull and for the sport itself.
Yeah, I think the big difference for me, and why I think that this will work versus something like Verstappen and Ricciardo maybe didn't as much at the end, is because of the way that this is kind of developed. You look at Ricciardo, he was there for a long time at Red Bull, and then Verstappen is somebody that comes up. He quickly joins the main team at such a young age, and then kind of usurps him as the number one in the eyes of the team in that dynamic and how that played out. In this situation, Perez is going into it knowing that Verstappen is the golden boy at Red Bull, and he's the number one. And so I think that results in a different relationship and a different dynamic there versus something where it's almost like Verstappen took what could have been Ricciardo's in that situation. And this one, that's not happening with Perez and Verstappen here. So I think that might be better for their relationship. I think that they'll also be able to push each other to the point where they maximize what's in the car versus something that might be a detriment as well. And the big thing this past season for Alex Albon and Red Bull as a whole was the qualifying. And it was consistently underperforming in terms of qualifying, going out in Q2 or a poor performance in Q3 if he made it through.
17-0 was the qualifying head-to-head,
exactly.
Right?
And you would expect that when it's Max Verstappen versus Alexander Albon. You expect that for somebody of Verstappen's quality. But the thing is they didn't get enough from Albon in those situations, and Perez will be able to go through and get those results to at least put himself in position to take advantage of things, which Albon wasn't able to do. You look at some of the surprise results over the season, Albon was never in position to take advantage of those outside of the very first Grand Prix because he was never qualified good enough to be in those positions to take advantage of them. And when you look at the results over the season, when Max Verstappen retired, Albon was never there to kind of take up that place that he would on the podium. You look at, let's just go through them all. Max Verstappen retires in Austria, first Grand Prix. Albon finishes 13th. I'll exclude that one because of obviously how that happened. But you go along in the season.
I think that's just quickly on that. I think that really deterred his confidence at the beginning. Like he was really pushing hard there, and he had Hamilton on the outside. It was just very unfortunate. I think it was just kind of a domino effect from there. Continue on. But I think that's worth noting that.
No, absolutely.
That's kind of like the tipping point. Same thing happened in Brazil, but he seemed like he recovered going into this season, but then it happened again, and it just never really got better from there.
I think that's exactly the point, because if he starts the season, honestly, maybe winning it. Maybe going through and winning it with the pace that he had.
Better tires there, yeah.
Exactly. Who knows what ends up happening the rest of the season. But that's how it started out. The next Verstappen retirement was at Monza. Albon finishes 15th. The one exception here is the Tuscan Grand Prix at Mugello, where Albon does get the podium finish when Verstappen retires. But then after that, you're looking at Imola, where Verstappen retires. Albon finishes 15th. And then after that, the last one is at Sakira, of course, where Verstappen crashes on the first lap. Albon finishes 6th. So out of, 4 or 5 opportunities there, where if you say the podium finish should be, in quotation marks, Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen, just given obviously the end of season point totals and what you would expect from each driver in that car, you would expect that to be the podium. And then Albon, you would expect to be the 4th driver in that situation. So in those 5 situations where Verstappen retires, you would expect Albon should be the one to take that final place on the podium. And out of the 5 opportunities, it only happened once. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But really, that's what it comes down to. It was Albon wasn't there enough to take the points that Red Bull needed to stay in any kind of fight with Mercedes when Verstappen wasn't up there on the podium or taking points away from Mercedes themselves. Albon never took points away from Mercedes or never took points away from Verstappen either. When they were all on the track, it was all if something happened. And obviously that would be different, again, if he doesn't get wrecked out by Hamilton in the Austrian Grand Prix. But that's why we're seeing this change. It's because Perez can come in, he can be that consistent. You know what you're going to get every weekend from him for Red Bull, and that's exactly what they need if they're going to have any fight against Mercedes. And that's why this move's being made. It's unfortunate for Albon. Again, I think he's got some raw talent there. I don't think that you should give up on him in terms of an F1 career into the future. But for right now, the move in terms of just simply competitive level for Red Bull needs to be Sergio Perez, and I'm glad that that's the move they're making.
Yeah, like you said, Albon was always playing catch up, and that was the problem. He just was there. He was never there to pick up the pieces from Verstappen, and that's what it comes down to. Like you said, it's just it may seem simple in reality, but it is difficult because it is Max Verstappen. It is really his car, and you have to go out there and try and beat him in it. And it's basically the same equipment. It's always going to be a trying task and a daunting task, but I think Perez is someone that can live up to that. And I hate to harp on it, but, we think back to Sergio Perez and his relationship with Esteban Ocon, a fiery guy, similar to Verstappen. So I would not be surprised next season if we see a Red Bull run-in at some point in time. I think that's almost inevitable with the amount of races we have next season, 23 tentatively with the schedule. I think there's bound to be 1 or 2 incidents between the Red Bull drivers throughout the season, so they have to be ready for that. And, Perez is not ready to or is not afraid to back down from a fight. And I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see the dynamic with Max being challenged for the first time in really 2 seasons here with Gasly and Albon in the first season. He was kind of like the main man for sure. And then this season, he was obviously the main man because Albon was just kind of so far behind him. So, this is going to be very, very interesting. I'm very, very excited. I'm tentatively excited because I am a Verstappen fan, but I am a fan of the sport as a whole. I'd rather have a product that is well suited for the consumer as a fan than have one singular driver succeed. This is not a Kyle Busch situation in NASCAR. This is Formula One and the top tier level of motorsports in the world. And we want to see a great product put on because, it has been gaining a lot of traction lately. I think younger people are starting to get involved with it. And if we can see more challenges up at the front, it will only increase the interest by fans. So very smart move, I think, here from Red Bull, just from that perspective for the TV interest and just keeping it competitive at the front, but then also giving Perez a shot here because it would be a shame if he was not in Formula One next season with what he's done this season, finishing 4th in the Drivers' Championship, missing 2 races. on top of that, like the expectations for this guy in next season are going to be through the roof in reality. When you look, that's probably the third best car. The Racing Point probably had the third best. They just had some unfortunate luck to end the season there. McLaren, rightfully so, was in contention there. Maybe probably should have finished fourth, but they took advantage of Racing Point's mistakes and misfortunes, and they finished third. So, Perez, third best car, but well ways ahead of basically his teammate there in Stroll, and then really establish himself as fourth in the drivers. I mean, that's almost what you're expecting from him next season, if not third, maybe. I think Bottas is very much at risk here next season to fall into the trap of Verstappen and Perez. I think he could get jumped, because let's not forget, Bottas has struggled with Mercedes because he finished behind Verstappen, Raikkonen, and Vettel in the 2018 season. So, he was very far off of the championship, winning, obviously, Lewis Hamilton. And that, I thought after that season he'd be done at Mercedes. But he's been given two lifelines here because they have been so superior compared to the pack really the last two seasons. So next season is make or break, because we know they've got George Russell that is very capable of going in that car and competing for wins in the very near future, if not for next season. But obviously Bottas is locked up with contracts. So this is going to make the front battle so spicy. I cannot wait. I'm so pumped to see Red Bull fight Mercedes on a consistent basis, split the strategies, make it have two competitive guys, most likely on a consistent basis, where they're in the top 4 or 5 instead of the top 7 or 8, which is where Albon would usually fall to, behind a Renault, McLaren, a Racing Point or two, something like that. It would just always make it so much more difficult for Albon to capitalize on other people's mistakes when he had guys that usually don't put a foot wrong ahead of him, like McLaren. They barely made a mistake this season. They were just so consistently good that Albon never really got a chance to go and fight them. So very, very enticing stuff here with Red Bull, with the Perez move and then also the Tsunoda move as well. But I think we kind of didn't see this coming, as we said off the top, but it's a very welcome surprise. So any final thoughts, I guess, on the Perez and Albon switcheroo?
I'm quite surprised that it's actually happening, but man, oh man, does that just add just another excellent storyline to watch, and one at the top of the grid going into next season, because we have so many different driver moves and things to watch for going into next season. And Perez at Red Bull is just going to be such a fascinating one to watch.
It's going to be very weird to see him in the Red Bull overalls.
So
the
weird.
racing series. It's going to look very weird, but I think we'll get used to it, and it'll be a welcome change in probably Australia when the season gets going in about three and a half months time, I guess it is, around that. Yeah. So relatively soon in Formula One terms, because they don't end as recently as they just did this past weekend at Abu Dhabi. But wow, what a storyline. And just when you thought Perez was out in unceremonious fashion with 11 laps into the Grand Prix on Sunday, he might get his second lifeline here and in Red Bull, which he definitely deserves. It's going to be tough for Alexander Albon, but I hope he stays with it here over the next season. And hopefully he gets another shot here in 2022 to fill in for somebody. And he's definitely the go-to guy for either AlphaTauri or Red Bull. If COVID is still prevalent in society and everything like that throughout the season, he could definitely be the one that steps in for each of these guys. I don't imagine Hulkenberg's going to be the super sub there next season. So I think Albon is going to be very touted as that guy for next season, just because of his stature already in the sport, having driven for Red Bull and whatnot. Obviously hasn't had the results, but it'll be interesting to see if he ever fills in for somebody next season if need be. But hopefully that's not the case. We don't want to wish anybody getting sick or anything like that. But Albon is going to be waiting in the wings to take advantage if something unfortunate like that happens. But Perez, congratulations, most likely here. We'll confirm it on Monday's edition of the show if and when the move is officially announced by Formula One, Red Bull, and whatnot. But very interesting stuff. I'm glad we got to kind of talk about that on today's episode, where it's a little bit lighter on the news front, but definitely very noteworthy. So I think we move on to the Red Bull Junior program here, Kyle, in AlphaTauri, as we've got Yuki Tsunoda making the highly anticipated move up to Formula One to replace the departing Daniil Kvyat. Very, very interesting stuff here. Tsunoda has been on the rise for the past 4 seasons, went to Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, and then now Formula 1 in successive seasons. Very interesting stuff. Third in the championship standings in F2, showed his prowess, showed his speed and pace on a weekly basis, finished the season off very strongly with a first and a second place in the feature and sprint race. So he's been marvelous, really, in his short tenure up through the ranks. He's a very young prospect, very enticing prospect. Red Bull really like this guy. Obviously, the relationship with Honda and being a Japanese driver, there's that connection as well, although it's going to be a very short-lived relationship between Honda and Red Bull for this next season. But very excited to see Yuki Tsunoda in Formula One next season, Kyle.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda, I think, was one of the big revelations of the F2 season this year. You look at his performance in 2019 in Formula 3, and it was good. It definitely outperformed his teammates and everything like that. But 9th overall and a decent ways behind some of his peers in this past Formula 2 championship season. When you look at Robert Schwartzman winning F3 that season, Marcus Armstrong second, even somebody like Johan Daruvala third, and fellow Red Bull Junior program driver and Yuri Vips finishing 4th there. So I think the way that he came on this season in Formula 2, I think the big thing is the success in the feature races as well. It really leaned towards this move. It was such a drastic jump from 2019 to 2020 in terms of performance. That shows really well for his development curve at this point. And then, as I mentioned there, the success in the feature races probably leans to success in Formula One a lot more than success in sprint races would. I don't think I need to explain that one. That one's pretty obvious. And to that point, it's obviously unfortunate we're losing Kvyat from the grid. He had a really solid season this year, but Pierre Gasly was just kind of otherworldly, essentially, in that AlphaTauri. But this is what that team is meant to do. It's supposed to have the next generation of Red Bull drivers, and that begins right now with Yuki Tsunoda. I don't know what realistic expectations are for him going into next season, especially against somebody like Pierre Gasly, who is intimately familiar with that car, has been at the team and in that program for a long time now, versus Yuki Tsunoda, who is the youngest driver on the grid. Of course, the first driver born in the 2000s to race in Formula One when he makes his debut in Australia, which is crazy to say. I'm glad that he's a couple weeks older than me at least, so that I don't have to say that there's a younger person than me in Formula One just yet, but that day is coming.
We still have time, Kyle. We still have time if we ever want to go down that road.
Exactly. But no, this is an excellent move, I think. I think it could have been a safer move to keep him in Formula 2 for another season. But I like giving him the seat now. Give him that time in Formula 1 and at AlphaTauri to develop. You have Sergio Perez there now with the Red Bull seat. You don't need to worry about any of these crazy moves, moving somebody up too early and all this kind of shenanigans that have happened with Albon, with Gasly, and even previously with Kvyat as well. Leave him there at AlphaTauri for a few seasons. Let him get adjusted to Formula 1, and then if he's succeeding, then maybe look down the road at something there. But I think that this is a reset year for Red Bull. Obviously, in doing so, bringing in Perez, straying away from what the normal system has been of bring up basically whoever's next in line in the Red Bull Junior system. And I think that that's going to result in some positive growth for people like Yuki Tsunoda coming through the program when it kind of resets at this time versus what's been a pretty chaotic last couple of years. So I'm excited to see Tsunoda make the jump. Is it maybe a little bit early? Sure. But I think the way that he was able to adjust from F3 to F2 in that development this season shows pretty well going into next season.
I think he's kind of found in the right spot in terms of the movement with drivers right now, because we're very young in Formula One right now. 26 or early 20s now is becoming the average age of the grid. We've got the likes of Hamilton, Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen, and Fernando Alonso, who's coming back in this sport.
That one.
Most
Alonso,
likely,
young driver.
Yeah, sorry. He's a rookie. He's right in there with the young guns of the sport, but. Yeah, I think that, for the next couple of seasons here, we got a couple of veterans, but there's not much room. I don't think these guys really want, for the big teams at least, to move their drivers around. And that's got to be a little bit discouraging for the younger prospects that are coming up, because who are you going to, you're not going to kick Daniel Ricciardo really out of Formula One. You're not going to kick Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc. The list goes on and on here. You're not going to kick these guys out of the sport for nothing. They're going to have to do something really poor to allow for a younger rookie to come in. So unfortunately, that's at the expense of Daniil Kvyat for this case for Tsunoda. But I mean, he's fitting in at the prime time, and most likely down the road we'll see him in the Red Bull seat. How many years that is from now is to be determined, but he's in that kind of pipeline here where it's going to translate to success. It's a very similar pattern, to like Albon and Gasly, obviously going up to the Red Bull Junior program and whatnot. So then they most likely will get to the Red Bull big program at some point in time in their career. That's what they always like to do. They want to give a person at least one shot with the big team before letting them move on. Obviously, maybe Carlos Sainz is at an expense of that. But, I mean, that's crazy to think that we could have seen a Verstappen-Carlos Sainz pairing. Like that Toro Rosso team to begin the 2015 season, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds right.
2016, one or the other. Could have been one of the best Red Bull teams that we've ever seen in history, but we got denied that because Verstappen got the call up first before Sainz, and then as a result, we've seen Ricciardo leave and so on. So I'm a big fan of this move. Like you said, I am a little bit tentative on it as well. I think Formula 2 for another season wouldn't have hurt him in any respect.
Yeah.
I think Kvyat did enough right now where he probably deserved maybe that ride. If not, Albon maybe should have gotten the ride for next season when they're doing this Perez move. So I don't know if and then most likely we'll see Pierre Gasly jump ship here if he doesn't get that Red Bull seat at some point in time over the next season as well, because he's definitely more talented than what that AlphaTauri is able to deliver for him. It's just whether or not a ride opens up for him to take. And then you maybe would see Tsunoda move up next season to partner Albon or somebody else. I think that would have been maybe a little bit more of a strategic play for Red Bull. And I mean, it's only going to get better for Tsunoda if he stays in Formula 2 for another season. I don't think he can really digress down there. The fact that he finished third in the championship, 15 points, I think it was, off of Mick Schumacher for the championship. That's very encouraging stuff. He would go into next season as the championship favorite against Robert Schwartzman, who would most likely be his main title contender from what we've seen. So I like the move, but at the same time, there could have been maybe a little bit of a different way that they went on this. But he was going to end up in Formula One eventually. They just decided to take that step a little bit earlier than maybe some people would have predicted, or some of the experts might have wanted. But I think Yuki Tsunoda is a really good talent, and we'll see him in Formula One most likely for a very long time. So I'm encouraged by what Red Bull's doing right now. I think they've got their kind of puzzle pieces in the right place. It's just whether that comes together and over the next season or two, as we see Perez most likely partnering Verstappen, and then Tsunoda partnering the very experienced Gasly, the very comfortable Gasly over there at AlphaTauri. I think it's a bit different than the Red Bull with Perez and Verstappen with, they're both very established drivers, but with Gasly, he's been around that team for many, many years, and he knows that team inside and out. He knows that car is capable of, and it's going to be up to Tsunoda to really take it to him next season and, not be a disappointment, which is the expectations are going to be, I think, set relatively good for Tsunoda to meet them. I don't think they're going to be out of this world per se, because they know it is a little bit of a lower seat than what Albon had to deal with jumping into the Red Bull last season, but encouraging stuff from Red Bull, like I said. So anything else you want to add with the Tsunoda move to AlphaTauri, and then obviously Daniil Kvyat as well being at the expense of this?
Yeah, I think the big question is, what was the better option for Red Bull, or what's the better option in general? Is it put Albon as the reserve driver and move Tsunoda up, or is it move Albon down to AlphaTauri and then have Tsunoda as either F2 driver again or a reserve driver? I think that's the question that needs to be asked. And in that regard, I really don't know what the best option is. I don't know if having a pairing of Albon Gasly is something that you really want, given the history there. I don't know if you want to keep Tsunoda down there in F2 or give him the opportunity. So obviously it depends how things goes. And if Tsunoda has a rough rookie season, then maybe you look back, hindsight 2020 being what it is, and look and say, okay, maybe Tsunoda should have been given a second season in F2 and Kvyat should have kept the seat, or Albon should have had that seat or something like that. Or maybe Tsunoda steps in and continues this development curve that we've seen from him over this last season, going from from F3 to F2, and how much of a jump he had in terms of performance there. And then maybe continues that trend and is challenging Pierre Gasly or something like that, and completely blows people away. Maybe that's what happens. We don't know what the situation is going to be yet. And so because of that, I like the move right now. We'll see how things play out. But I'm a big fan of what Red Bull's got going on right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for Danny Kvyat, I would like to see him back in Formula One at some point in time. I think he's done enough over his second stint in the sport to prove that he is a clean driver and is a very competitive driver, and that can challenge his teammates without being the torpedo, as famously known from Verstappen or from Vettel from the Chinese Grand Prix a couple of seasons ago. So it all kind of spiraled out of control for Kvyat since then, having to leave, then come back, and then he's done a very good job stepping into that role, knowing his place there. He was never really going to get the call back up to Red Bull. I think he knew that when he signed up for it, but he took that on the chin, and he excelled in that car. He did everything he could to compete with Pierre Gasly and Alexander Albon for a short period of time there as well. And it's unfortunate that he's going to be going. We're going to miss the Russian on the grid next season. We've got another one stepping in his place, which we'll talk about here in a second, for the nationality kind of things. But definitely a different person Danny Kvyat is compared to the person we're going to talk about here in a second. But for Kvyat, I hope he comes back. It's never going to be really in a top flight seat. It's going to be a mid-pack to back of the grid team, most likely for him, if he does end up coming back into the sport, which he hasn't completely shut out, like the likes of Magnussen or someone like Grosjean, who are done with the sport for the rest of their careers, it seems. So I think Kvyat would like to come back, and I think he is. I wish we had 22 cars, because I think some of the guys that would have been maybe on the way out would have been a good fit for a guy like Kvyat to maybe step into a fake team that would be on the grid, I guess. I need Manor back. I miss Manor. I think I never thought I'd say that, but yeah, I think just having that 22nd, kind of team, or the 11th team, that would just bring this opportunity for some guys that maybe should not be out of the sport to go to, or there could be some movement around that, but that's all hypothetical stuff. But for Tsunoda, congratulations on the move to Formula One. After a successful F2 campaign, you really impressed a lot of people in the paddock, and obviously the Red Bull executives to put you in the AlphaTauri seat for next season. So any final thoughts, I guess, on the Perez and Tsunoda news that has really come out over the past 24 hours?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that things have played out this way for Albon and Kvyat. They're both talented drivers that I think in Albon's case almost certainly will get a second chance sometime down the road. For Kvyat, I don't really know what comes next. Maybe it's a reserve or a test ride for an F1 team, or maybe it's something else down the road. We'll have to see how things play out for both of these drivers. It's unfortunate that they're on the outside looking in, but I think that Red Bull here has probably made the best decisions possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that does it for the Red Bull conversation for today's episode. Very good conversation here, I think. It puts a nice bow on the F1 season as well. Just kind of puts that storyline behind us, something that was lingering over the sport for the past 2 months or so. And it seems like that's finally getting put to bed, and we can get on to 2021 news and start looking forward to that season. So we can quickly address here, Kyle, the We Say No, hashtag We Say No to Mazepin movement that has really caught social media by storm over the past, I guess, week or so since the social media post was shared with Mazepin. We talked about that last week. Just very unfortunate, the entire video and the effects that it's had onto the young female that was affected in the video. So you hate to see stuff like this. And for Mazepin stepping into Formula One next season in a back marker team, most likely in Haas F1 team, but nonetheless, it is a Formula One seat that his dad is basically paying for, and stuff like this is just not acceptable, no matter what. And I'm fully in support of this movement, no matter what the outcome is, whether that's if he gets onto the F1 grid, no matter what, because of daddy's money. But if it does actually come to fruition, if something can be changed about this, I think Haas would do themselves better off with doing something about this and not pushing it underneath the rug and trying to move past it and not address it as candidly as it should be. So it's important that we address this stuff because it is the sensitive and serious topics that, some people may not are willing to address, but as sport media students, we have to have the difficult conversations sometimes in sports, and this is definitely one of them. But I applaud the people that are doing this, who started the movement, and the stories that have been shared, and the people that have been willing to come forward and tell their stories of sexual assault. And it's very eye-opening, I guess, just to see how one person's actions can affect so many people and inspire so many people at the same time to tell their stories. So your thoughts on the hashtag We Say No to Mazepin movement?
We talked about it a bit last week. We know the person that Mazepin is, and it's great to see just kind of people doing the most that they can, essentially. And it's something where he's got such a history even before this situation, but it's the BS attempted apology and almost like cover up kind of thing that they tried to do with the whole situation. We knew it was all disingenuous because he's shown in the past with actions and things that he's done, the kind of person that he is. And we knew it was hollow apologies, just kind of semantics and trying to save face, that kind of thing. But people are genuinely upset about this. And when you look at some of the names that are losing seats right now and the kind of people that they are, and then you look at this guy getting a seat, and you can debate whether he deserves it or not based off of his actual racing performance, but you can't deny why he's getting the seat. It's because he's got a load of money behind him. It's frustrating to see, and it's great to see people kind of stick up to the situation and be like, no, we don't want to see this. We don't think that this is somebody that should be representing our sport. We don't think that this is somebody that morally should be on the grid based off of the actions that they've done, both now and in the past. And we would like to see something done about it. Whether something is, I highly doubt it, just because contracts have been signed, although we've seen contracts tore up quite a bit in Formula One. Just look at Perez being available this season. And money talks. We know that it does, no matter the situation, no matter what it is, money talks. And in this situation, the guy in question has a lot of money. And so because of that, he's probably going to be racing a Formula One car next year, which is unfortunate to say, but keep the hashtags going as long as you can, because the longer it goes, the more likely it is that something happens, I guess, or until somebody has to address it or something like that. But I stand firmly on the Say No to Mazepin train. I did before the incident, if we're being honest. And after that incident and everything we've seen play out since then with the female in question, posting even more stuff about it, and pointing towards them not knowing each other previous to that night, and just everything shining such a terrible, terrible light on Mazepin and the kind of person he is. I hope we don't see him on the grid next season. I would love to see Pietro Fittipaldi in the seat, Daniil Kvyat, basically anybody else. But the odds, Hulkenberg, anybody. But the odds of that happening are extremely low at this point. Let's keep it going. Let's keep the trend going. See if anything can happen with it. But maybe it's pessimistic of me to say, but I doubt anything really does happen.
It is rare in something like this where something like this can actually impact change, but we've seen it in the past where it is possible, where a social media movement can spark change, and hopefully this is one that ends up having an end result that we all really want, and that's Mazepin not getting that seat next season. If it means the end for Haas F1 team, that's very unfortunate, because obviously they need funding. That's the primary reason that Mazepin's getting that seat, and he brings a lot of dough with him. And it's unfortunate that this guy is the one that has the money. It usually is the case where the spoiled rich kid gets into trouble, but then he's got money to get himself out of every single situation. And this is the kind of situation that presents itself here. So, unfortunate that we're going to see this guy most likely in Formula One next season. But as Kyle said, let's keep it going. We can't just think this is a
do what we can, essentially
two-week deal. And maybe they'll listen. Maybe Haas, Formula One, Mazepin himself will listen and, really think about, have a hard think and really think about what kind of person he wants to be and who he's really trying to impress in his young life and young life. That's all I want to say. I'm not going to go too much further than that. But, it's important to address this stuff, like I said. So I think we continue on here, Kyle, with a little bit more of upbeat stuff. So we've got IndyCar news. That does it for Formula One in terms of the news over the past couple of days. IndyCar has got a scheduling changed, as similarly to NASCAR last week, where we had to discuss NASCAR moving its date from the Auto Club Speedway to the Daytona Road Course due to COVID-19 policies in the state of California. IndyCar is having to do something a little bit similar, as they're changing its Long Beach Grand Prix date from the early part of the season to the season finale on September 26th, I believe is the date. So, Long Beach has supplied some great racing over the years, and this is going to be a great way to end the season in Formula One. And hopefully there's not going to be any impact when it comes time to September with COVID-19 and everything is safe to go in California and the rest of the world, that we feel safe enough where we can have a racing back in that state. So, I'm glad that they're not getting rid of it off the calendar entirely. This is what NASCAR should have done. Move the California date a little bit later into the season or something. I'm sure you can move stuff around. We've seen it in the past. I don't think it would have been that difficult, but we're seeing here that IndyCar is being a bit flexible here and moving it all the way to the end of the season. They've got a West Coast swing to end their season now with Portland, Laguna Seca, and now Long Beach to end the season. So 3 trips to the West Coast, to end the IndyCar season. And it would also play host to the same weekend as IMSA. They're going to be having a doubleheader weekend at Long Beach with the 2 motorsport series there. So very interesting stuff here. Very happy that they're keeping it on the calendar. It's always a great race to watch, just based off of the scenic visuals that we get, and also from the racing product itself. It supplies some good stuff. So happy to see that they're staying on the calendar with this move here, Kyle.
Yeah, extremely happy that it's remaining on the calendar. And, well, you can make those kind of moves and basically tuck it in the last possible date of the season when you don't have a playoff format and you don't have to worry about those scheduling. But that's a whole different thing now, isn't it? I love the fact that it's remaining on the calendar. And actually, I think it could be a pretty cool season finale as well. It's a race and a track that has a lot of history in the sport as well. So it's not something like some random track that's being moved in potentially the season finale. And I like the fact that they're at least trying to get it in. And maybe if you're a month and a half, 2 months out, and it looks like it's going to still be unlikely that you can go to it in some kind of normal capacity, then you can go and make the change then and go somewhere else. But as of right now, I like the move to try and do everything in your power to keep it on the schedule, especially just because I want to see Jimmy Johnson run at Long Beach. I think that would be very, very cool. But no, season finale at Long Beach, I am very much here for. Love the decision to keep it on the schedule, move it around, do what you can, and hopefully we're going Long Beach racing next year in IndyCar.
Yeah. As we talked about in the show when they released the 2021 calendar, there is some, it's unfortunate we don't see as many ovals, but at least they're keeping one of the premier street circuits on the calendar for next season. So at least there's that for IndyCar going. I wish NASCAR could say the same with Auto Club Speedway, but that's another conversation for another time. But very, very excited that they're keeping this on the calendar. So wanted to address that. As well as with IndyCar, we've got confirmed for the silly season side of things.
Yes.
With Dalton Kellett racing full-time for AJ Foyt Racing in 2021. He ran 8 races this past season, for the team, and was running at the finish of 7 of those races. So he got the car home 7 out of 8 times last season. So solid numbers there for Dalton Kellett. Didn't wow me or anything like that from his IndyCar performance, but had some hit or miss moments, had some, outside the top 10-ish runs at some point in times, but was, mainly in the mid to late teens for the majority of the season there in his IndyCar stint. But happy to see that he's getting the shot full-time next season, Kyle.
Yeah, it's always great to see another Canadian on the grid, and it looks like he's probably taking we don't know what Foyt's going to do yet. We don't know if they're going to do 2 full-time or 3 full-time yet. But if it is only the 2, it looks like he's probably taking Charlie Kimball's full-time ride. If they go 3, then maybe Kimball returns, or maybe those Grosjean rumors come to fruition. We'll see what happens there. But for Kellett there, the big thing is going to be, can he drive a Sebastian Bourdais kind of setup? Because Bourdais going to that team, and we saw what he was able to do in that equipment in the finale there at St. Pete for Bourdais there. Road course heavy schedule as well, as we've talked about multiple times. Not much diversifying of the schedule for IndyCar next season. Only a couple trips to ovals there. So it's going to be, can Kellett run those Bourdais setups on the road courses? And if he can, then maybe we can see some surprise runs from Kellett. But given his career to this point, my expectations aren't enormous, especially given Foyt's kind of performance level in the past as well. It looks more like he's going to be one of those kind of field fillers, essentially, where he's going to be mid-pack towards the back for most of the time. But maybe we can get some surprise top 15s or maybe even top 10 runs from Kellett next season. I'm excited to see him full-time just because, obviously, the Canadian factor. And we'll see what Foyt ends up doing. I hope they go for the third car, because then in that case, then I think having somebody like Kellett in there is maybe more of like a long-term project or something like that would be an especially good move there. But remains to be seen what they end up doing full-time for next season. But you got Bourdais in there. He's the veteran there. And then we'll see what happens with Dalton Kellett there pairing with him next season.
I hope we get to see 3 full-time vehicles out of that stable. Be a shame if Charlie Kimball doesn't get the full-time ride next season, but
maybe he goes back to Carlin or something.
Yeah, and even part-time, I don't know. But I would like to see him full-time. I think he's deserving of that. But Dalton Kellett did some solid stuff last season, so we can see if the Canadian driver, another Canadian driver to the IndyCar grid next season, can establish himself as a prominent top 15, maybe even a top 10 contender on occasion throughout the season. So not too high of expectations for him, but nonetheless, just trying to compete with Sebastian Bourdais is going to be a challenge in itself. So hopefully the young Canadian driver is going to be up to the task. So exciting stuff there in IndyCar. Haven't had too much movement in terms of drivers for the past couple of weeks, but slowly but surely, I'm sure we'll see some more announcements being made as maybe Romain Grosjean, like you said, there is a potential with him coming over to the States and racing in IndyCar next season. So fingers crossed that happens. I would love to see Romain Grosjean, another Formula One guy, come over, joining Marcus Ericsson as an old Formula One driver. Alexander Rossi as well. People forget of that. He used to race in Formula One. But, exciting stuff there for Dalton Kellett and the Canadian fans, racing fans, I guess. So anything else you want to add on that, Kyle?
No, I think we're good to move on.
All right, so the last little bit of news before we get into grading Formula One drivers' seasons is the Next Gen test in Daytona. Woo! What a storyline this is. If I hear this as a sequential gear shift, gearbox, whatever you want to call it, one more time, how great it is, I will lose my marbles, because that's the only thing I've really heard from the entire test that we've had over the last month or so, from the road course test at Charlotte to the Daytona one. I texted this to Kyle as soon as I saw Chris Buescher's video on the NASCAR social media channels that I really like the sequential shifting. Well, anything else you like about the car? Because that's basically the only positive that we've heard from this car over the past couple of, month or so. And also, you said the brakes were good. Wow. NASCAR really stepping up their game. But all jokes aside, it is just a Daytona test. And they just did the oval, just trying to hit their speed limit and hit their marker for what they were anticipating for speeds with this next generation of car. So not much exciting in terms of that. Just wanted to address it because we talked about that on Monday, that they were going to do the test. It is done and dusted, and they've got some Goodyear tire tests planned in the new year, and they'll start doing some more thorough testing with the tires and finalize the setup of the car before they announce it fully for the teams to start working on their 2022 plans. So from the social media videos and what we've seen tweeted out and stuff, what were your impressions from the test, Kyle?
I mean, is there any impressions to take away? Like it's a test single car for the next gen car with all NASCAR stuff there. There's not like much in terms of media presence or anything. And it's at Daytona. So like there's basically nothing you can take away. It's all going to be technical data stuff and whatnot for the engineers to look at in terms of top speeds, aerodynamics, I guess a little bit. But there's nothing much that a driver is going to be able to take away from a single car test at Daytona, right? So I understand the frustration and I definitely get it, but like there's only so much you can ask for out of that kind of test. If we were getting this kind of stuff out of like the Charlotte test and stuff, then I would be much more on your side and upset and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a racing situation or even like much to take away. So like it's fun to talk about and whatnot, but yes. Boring is exactly what it is. It's just kind of checking all the boxes that they need to do. And of all the tests that they could possibly do, this is the one that probably means the least in terms of the grand scheme of things. But I haven't seen much in terms of information from the test either. So I haven't seen like top speeds or anything like that. But at least we got the reminder that it's a sequential gearbox.
Yeah. Totally forgot that they had a sequential gearbox. Thank God they reminded me again.
And improved brakes. So
yeah, can't forget about those brakes. Those brakes are what make the car stop. So, it's a very important tool for these drivers. So, I mean, hopefully they talk about the gas pedal next time. That would be very interesting. Hey, does the car go when you press the gas pedal? Yeah. Okay. That's great stuff.
I mean, you got a couple extra gears. Maybe it does. I don't know.
I don't know. I could care less, to be honest, about the gas pedal I mean, this next gen car is going to give me a headache. I'm going to,
I cannot wait for it.
Because I've got a lot to say with this next development. I was watching 2007 races the other day because I was so depressed from this last season of NASCAR Cup Series racing. I'm like, just take me back to that car or similar speeds or something like that where the cars could follow, get the car. I saw Jeff Gordon punt Dale Earnhardt Jr. on a 1.5 mile track. Are you kidding me? You couldn't do that today. And they didn't wreck. The beautiful racing that was the Generation 4 car, 2007 specifically. I'm just infatuated with that year because that was the first year I watched the sport. So I've always got a soft spot for the 2007 season. But that's totally off topic. I just had to mention that. But that does it for the news and notes and my watching plans over the past couple of days, really. So yeah, that'll do it for that part of today's episode. And now we get the red pens out, Kyle, once again. Professor Wacker and Professor Cushman have
all I've got is a pencil. Sorry.
Session. I
didn't come prepared.
Here, but I don't want to reach out of camera. So, very excited to get this thing going. As we said off the top, we're going to discuss every single driver that's took the wheel behind an F1 cockpit this season in race. We're not going to do FP1 stuff. Okay, we're not going to go to that extreme.
What, you don't want to give a grade to Roy Nissany?
No, I was thinking about it. I was very close, but I took the I took the safe measure here and tried to limit here with time. So we start off with the grading for the Formula. So just quickly, we'll do it grading with A, B, C, D. That has a D plus and a D minus. I found that out since the last time we recorded. I was very adamant about that last time, where I was like, I didn't know that there was a D plus or a D minus, but after looking it up after the show we recorded, there is an actual thing called a D plus.
I don't know. Maybe your BC school system's just weird.
Well, it is maybe it is a little bit to the England kind of thing where they have like A star and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't understand their terminology for their stuff, but with that being said, we've got the standard, grades with A plus, B plus, B, all the letter grades. We're going to try and encapsulate a driver's season with just a letter grade, which is going to be tough to do, but we did it last time with about 36 drivers for the Cup Series. So we're going to try and do it here with 23 or 22, whatever the number is.
I think it's 23.
One. Yeah, I think it's 23 as well with Fittipaldi, Aitken, and Hulkenberg. But let's get into it, Kyle, with the biggest one of them all, Jack Aitken.
Yes, going alphabetically.
Going alphabetical order, starting with the A's here with Jack Aitken. Obviously had one fill-in race here this season, late in the season at the Secure Grand Prix for George Russell, who was replacing the ill Lewis Hamilton from COVID-19. So we talked about that a couple of episodes ago. Make sure to go watch that if you hadn't and get our reaction to the entire news of that and the actual race itself, because what a race that was. But for Jack Aitken, stepping in, reserve driver for the most part for Williams this season, ran an F2 consistently as well. Had to miss that race, obviously, for racing for Williams in that one. But, a solid campaign in both F2. Maybe a little bit down in terms of the running order where he would have liked to have been. But for Formula One itself, had to step into an entirely new car, basically, something he's not too familiar with his usual driving in Formula 2. And I think he did an admirable job. He did spin to cause the kind of chaotic finish that it resulted, but at the same time, it is a Williams back-of-the-grid car, so take that into consideration with your grade. But for myself, for Jack Aitken, for his one-off appearance for the Secure Grand Prix, I'm going to give him a B+. I think he did an admirable job just because – stepping into a car like that is never easy. Going into a weekend, the pressure's on, your first Formula One race, totally unexpected, and I think he handled it quite admirably. Was ahead of Nicholas Latifi for a couple of runs in Q1 before ultimately getting nipped by his Canadian teammate there in Latifi on the last run. But up until that point, Aitken showed some speed. And I think it was encouraging signs that he could compete with some of the guys back there, was challenging at the beginning part of the race. So I'm going to give Aitken a solid B+ for his one race in 2020 in the Williams. So what have you got for Jack Aitken?
Well, I think you can guess the trend that this is going to go again. I was impressed by Aitken for sure in that performance, but the spin in the race was a big deal for me, not only because it caused the events that ensued that kind of screwed the guy that he was replacing out of the victory and everything like that, but spinning out and wrecking the front wing and causing the damage and like that is like the thing that you don't want the replacement driver to do. But other than that, I was really impressed by his pace and everything like that, stepping in that situation. So I'll just give him a nice even C. I think that's fair.
Oh man, starting off way off the board in comparison to our grades here, Kyle. I totally understand where you're coming from, though. I could probably bump him down to a B. I'll do that. I'll bump him down to a B. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll keep it to a B. Okay. A B+ is probably a little bit generous compared to what his counterparts did for that race the whole season. So I'll give him a B.
Yeah, the tough thing for me was trying to find like a reasonable grade for like these 1 or 2 race guys versus guys who ran the entire schedule, and trying to find a fair place to put them, because Aitken, yeah, you can say that like he had like a B+ performance in there. But then let's say somebody else you gave like a C+ or a C grade, and well, did Aitken really have that much better of a season than these guys? And that was something that I battled with a little bit. So I think I went a little bit lower on some of the substitute guys, but we'll see how the rest of things go.
Yeah, I totally respect that. You are the harsher marker of the two of us, so I'm not surprised out of the gate that it is that different. But for Aitken, I think B, C, kind of around that range is nothing. It was definitely not an A performance. It wasn't a D performance.
Yes,
it was a solid job. Wasn't anything too spectacular, but encouraging signs that as he develops more, there is a possibility that he could come into Formula One at some point in time for a team that really, really wants him. So that does it for Jack Aitken. We move into Alexander Albon, a topic of discussion earlier in the show. For obvious reasons with the Sergio Perez announcement, so this is a perfect time to grade Alexander Albon's season. Hey, Kyle? Yeah, this is a difficult one, but I'll let you lead this one off for Albon.
Yeah, we discussed Albon quite a bit already in the show, obviously, so I won't dive too much into things. But when you look at the season, he was vastly outperformed by his teammate, to the point where he finished in the driver's standings behind 3 drivers driving for 3 other teams when he was in the second best team by constructor standings. So that's a big mark on him.
Tied with the guy, though, for 6. Just put that in there.
Yeah, but Sainz has the second place, which puts him ahead. So, and he did not start for a race. So I'm counting it, Sainz finishing ahead.
Okay.
Other than that, he had some bright spots this season. Obviously, the 2 podiums, and in the third he should have got in Austria to start the season. That factors in as well. But then when you look at the decision today, where or we expect to come probably when you're listening to this by now, that Albon is out and Perez is in, I was originally going to go with like a C- probably for him. But because Red Bull made the decisions themselves that he did not have a good enough season to remain in that seat, I had to drop him down to just a straight D.
Yeah, I went with a D+ for Alexander Albon. I would have given him a straight D, but the 2 podiums just kind of gave me that little boost of a letter grade, to be honest. But other than that, a very disappointing season, as we talked about earlier in the show.
Especially the way he finished last year. Like, we already talked about it quite a bit, but...
It's just, it pains me to do it, though, you know?
Yeah.
It's just...
Such a likable guy.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that. So I wish him all the best. It's just unfortunate that things haven't worked out this season as we would have liked, and we would have hoped that he would have, we would have loved to have seen him fourth, challenging for Verstappen, on a consistent basis, but it just wasn't quite there all season long. So disappointing there for Alexander Albon. Gets a D grade from Kyle and a D+ grade from myself. So we move on to another spicy one here, Kyle. Just
starting off strong.
Yeah. What a mix, eh? The first 4, we've got 2 kind of one-off guys and then 2 firmly maybe disappointing guys, but we'll get into this one here. With Valtteri Bottas, the second driver over at Mercedes. I'm saying second driver because it is that prominent that he is the second driver over at Mercedes. That is Lewis Hamilton's team, and Valtteri Bottas is just living in that world. So Valtteri Bottas, what an interesting one, hey? 2 wins on the season, same as Max Verstappen in a car that is lesser of the 2. And Valtteri Bottas, very underperformed the majority of the season, I'd say. Started the season off with a win at the Austrian Grand Prix. And other than that, we did not see much from him this season. He always was behind Hamilton in both qualifying and in the race. Got out qualified 11-4, I think it was, in terms of the head-to-head. So not much from Bottas. Got lapped at the Turkish Grand Prix. I mean, this is a miserable season for Valtteri Bottas. I'm going to just give him a C- for the season. I can't give him anything higher than that because it's disappointing that he's still in that ride, to be honest. I think he's a capable driver, but he's not Mercedes-level talent to take it to Lewis Hamilton for titles. So I think he's deserving of a grade that is a little bit harsh. And I think this might have been the worst season that I've seen from Valtteri Bottas over there at Mercedes since his spell started in 2017 after replacing the champion, Nico Rosberg. Let's not forget he went into a championship-winning vehicle here and has not performed to any level close to what Rosberg did in that car. So C- for me for Valtteri Bottas. The only reason I don't give him a D grade, probably just the 2 wins, I guess. And, I don't know. I mean, I could give him just a D+, to be honest. I think he's basically on par with Alexander Albon's performance this season. So, but I'll stick with the C+, C-, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more generous, shockingly enough. I'm going to say just a straight C for me. Just because did pick up the 2 wins there, which, again, isn't saying much. You would expect that at minimum for a Mercedes. But he still got second in the championship. He still did enough to get where he's supposed to finish for that team. He still did enough for them to easily win the Constructors as well. Did he do something where you look at it and go, yes, that's a championship level driver? No, absolutely not. But for the role that he's in at Mercedes and for the position that he's in, he was a C-level driver, in my opinion. He wasn't anything higher than that where he was pushing Hamilton or going out and having these spectacular performances, but he also didn't finish behind Max Verstappen. He had a tough end to the year, of course, and that's probably what's most prevalent in our mind, but he did start off the season moderately well. So for that, I think on the whole, he's a C grade, but to keep the seat going into, I guess, a season from now for 2022, he probably needed something along the lines of a B grade, and that simply didn't happen this year.
I'm changing my grade to a D+. I can't justify it because I just looked at the standings. Okay, Lewis Hamilton had 347 points. Okay, the constructor standings, Red Bull had 319. So Lewis Hamilton would have beat Red Bull by himself.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. We don't even need Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes, and they still finished first in the Constructors' Championship. Okay. Like, that is miserable for Bottas. Hamilton missed the race, and he's still over 100 points behind his teammate, and he got outshined by George Russell in his one-off appearance miserably. So, yeah, I'm giving him a D+. I'm sorry, Bottas, but I can't accept that. After looking at that very closely, that's ridiculous. But I can't be harsh on that probably, but at the same time,
yeah, the one thing
I
that
expect him a little bit better than him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one thing that I will say to defend Bottas was that the reason why the gap was so big, in addition to Hamilton's dominance, was the fact that Bottas, majority of the season, was the one to finish in between Hamilton and Verstappen. So that took away points available for Verstappen. Obviously, it wasn't a great total for him. And by no means do I think that he should be in the seat going to next season. I think it should be George Russell's. But I think season long, it was still a fine performance. But especially after that weekend where we saw George Russell step into the car, we know what the expectation level should be for somebody in that car. And we saw it previously with Nico Rosberg as well. So maybe a little generous on my side. Maybe I should be going something more similar to like the C-, but I'll stick with it for now.
I understand where you're coming from. Like, I just think he's shown me nothing really over the past 3-4 seasons he's been at Mercedes, to be honest. Like, he's just hasn't wowed me in any sense of the imagination.
But do they really want him to either, though? Like, it's much more comfortable for Mercedes to have the clear 1-2, win the Constructors easily, finish 1-2 in the championship easily. Like, it's not like they're getting that much of a challenge from behind.
Well, it's not that they maybe don't want it, but as a fan, I definitely want it.
Oh, no, absolutely. So, I'm just talking about the situation that he finds himself in.
I just don't think that he's deserving of a seat so good like this. Like, I mean, I hate to say it, but swap him with George Russell right now and just put him down at Williams. Like, I don't think anybody would really mind that, right? Like,
from the fan perspective, absolutely. But the only thing is that why would Mercedes do it? Like, what's the incentive there?
George Russell's better.
But do they need a better driver? They just locked up how many championships in a row, drivers and constructors? Like, I
feel like they're just wasting him down there right now. Like, why not use a guy that's so young and talented in a car? Like, just see what he can do. You know, there's no harm in putting him in the car. I just think Bottas just like, I'd like Bottas as a guy. I think he's underlying kind of personality in the sport. Doesn't have to say too much. Very quiet guy. But I just needed more from him to justify giving him at least a C+ or something like that. Because, I mean, Hamilton just outperformed him like crazy. Like, this is the worst it's ever been. Because there's no real competition from behind. I can understand past seasons where you got Ferrari and Red Bull a little bit closer and winning races periodically throughout. But, I mean, to have most of the season go to Hamilton, and Bottas has the same number of wins as Max Verstappen. Almost got beat by Verstappen, let's be honest. I mean, if Verstappen didn't have as bad of luck as he did, for the Sakir Grand Prix, he would have definitely beat Bottas there. He probably could have even won that race, Verstappen. So I think he had a better season overall in Verstappen. We'll talk about him a little later. But Bottas himself, I'm giving him a D+. I can't justify giving him a C. So I think we can move on from Bottas. Yes. Do you want to? Yeah. All right. We've got Pietro Fittipaldi, another fill-in driver here as the fourth guy for the grades. You take this one away here first, Kyle.
Yeah, Fittipaldi is an interesting one because by the end of the season, Haas was just so bad, if we're being honest. And having to step in those circumstances as well, having not stepped in a car in a race situation in a year, it was an extremely tough one for Fittipaldi to step into. And I think he did as serviceable of a job as you can expect for somebody in that situation. So I'll keep things nice and consistent. I thought Jack Aitken did a solid job stepping in at Williams. Given his circumstance, I think Fittipaldi did a solid job stepping in his circumstance. So I'll give him the nice same grade of a C.
I'm going to give him a B+. I'm going a little bit nicer on the reserve guys. Just for Fittipaldi, I gave him one extra letter grade, I guess, higher or like a plus higher than Aitken after thinking about it, because Aitken spun and wrecked. Fittipaldi kept the car clean the entire time in both races for himself. So I think that satisfies the requirement there. While he wasn't really necessarily close to Magnussen on pace anywhere throughout the entire weekends for both of them, I think he did a solid job to prove himself that he is capable of, something like this in the future. I don't think he's ready for F1 yet, but I think he did an admirable job stepping into the circumstances with Romain Grosjean's unfortunate departure from the sport and the way he went out and having to step into a car like that. That's obviously a lot of pressure and a lot of mixed emotions coming into a guy's seat like that. So I think he did an admirable job. I think he did a little bit better than Aitken. Obviously had that extra weekend as well compared to Aitken with having the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as well. And 2 laps down at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as well. So that's not great, but I want to be a little bit nicer on these guys because they did come into a seat that they're unfamiliar with, and they just had to go out there and race for 2 weekends when the season is basically over. They weren't racing for anything. The expectations weren't too high on them, and I think Fittipaldi did an admirable job to fill in for Romain Grosjean there too in the final 2 races of the season. So very similar, I guess, for both of us in terms of how we review how we view the reserve drivers to this point in time. So I don't really want to spend too much time on Fittipaldi. I think we touched on him fairly reasonably enough in terms of time. I think we can move on to a full-time guy here, Kyle, in Pierre Gasly. Very interesting one here. Obviously a Grand Prix winner. Crazy to say that this season, bringing AlphaTauri, the newly renamed AlphaTauri, their second ever win in their existence. Obviously Sebastian Vettel won one for Toro Rosso back in the day, and crazy to say that's been at the same track as well in Monza. So what a time for AlphaTauri. They love that place. And for Pierre Gasly, how can you not give him an A+? He's totally deserving of it this season. He just was lights out, competed against Daniil Kvyat and outperformed him on a consistent basis, got home the results, and I think the win in itself is worthy enough of an A+. So very impressive stuff from Pierre Gasly after getting demoted last season, showed his prowess again with this team that he's very comfortable with, and this full-time season with AlphaTauri just was exceptional and performed really well on a consistent basis, was up in the top 5 at some points in time, had some great qualifying efforts that shocked some people. So I think considering everything that guy's been through the past year and a half or so, being robbed, lost his best friend, everything like that, and winning a race, he is very deserving of an A+ grade.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. This was one of the easiest grades to give out this season. If you look at driver of the year for Formula One, it's hard to argue against Lewis Hamilton just because of how impressive he was in the records and everything like that. But a close number 2 for me, honestly, has been Pierre Gasly. As you mentioned there, just the rebound from what was such a chaotic season last year, to go out and perform so consistently this year, to go out and win that race, of course, at Monza, but also on the season as a whole, finish ahead of a Racing Point, which was easily the 3rd fastest car on the grid, a Renault, it with being driven by somebody like Esteban Ocon as well, who is regarded as one of the better long-term prospects in the sport. And, Sebastian Vettel in a Ferrari as well. And, of course, there's extenuating circumstances there. But the fact that he finished top 10 in driver standings in an AlphaTauri is remarkable. And so absolutely deserving of the A+ grade.
Yeah. And I think that's a consensus amongst everybody in the sport. Even if you just tuned into to the Monza race, I think everybody would give him an A+ just based off of that too. So we can move on to Antonio Giovinazzi, Kyle. A bit of an interesting one here.
Yes, a very interesting one because he's somebody that kind of flies under the radar a little bit when you're looking at the grid here, just because Alfa Romeo definitely underperformed versus what you were hoping the progression to be going into the season, as all of the Ferrari-powered cars did, of course. But under the radar, out-qualified Kimi Raikkonen 9-8 this season. In the races, it didn't go as well for him. He was out-finished 12-5 by Raikkonen there. But he showed very, very strong starts this season, kind of been renowned for his starts this season. 3 points finishes to Kimi Raikkonen's 2, although they did finish on the same point total of 4 there. So I'm going to just nice and easy there for Antonio Giovinazzi, a C+. We need to see more from him going into next season if he wants to stay there long term. But honestly, I like the fit there of Alfa Romeo and Giovinazzi. We'll see what happens, obviously, with Raikkonen long-term, because, of course, he's the oldest on the grid. And we'll see if maybe Eilert or something like that gets that seat beside Giovinazzi going into the future. But I like the partnership between Alfa Romeo and Giovinazzi. Solid season this year, so C+ for him.
Yeah, I give him a B-, so right around the same grade. Just that one tick higher. I agree with everything you said there. Giovinazzi did a very under-the-radar job this season, and I didn't like the rumors that were being circulated that he would be out of the sport, because I think he's done enough where he's outperformed Kimi Raikkonen this season with qualifying. Maybe he doesn't have the results in the race. I think part of that is just Raikkonen's unwildly experience and just bringing the car home in one piece. I think he's just a master on race pace, but Giovinazzi's quick on Saturdays, and I think there is the future for him in this sport. I don't know if he'll ever get to the Ferrari top-level seat, because I think they've got their duo there for long-term here with Sainz and Leclerc, but for Giovinazzi, he's just got to keep pushing and just try and make Alfa Romeo that little bit better season by season. We saw glimpses of it last season, Raikkonen more prominently last season, but I think Giovinazzi's taking that next step forward. Hopefully Alfa Romeo will take that next step forward, go back to what they were last season, and in 2021 really show that Giovinazzi has improved since the car was kind of at the back of the grid, getting eliminated in Q1, or at the very most making it to Q2, but being the last qualifier in that round. So I think Giovinazzi has some work to do, but a solid B- grade for myself for the Italian driver and the Italian powered car. So for Gio, very solid season. And we move on to one of the biggest stories this season, just based off of the Bahrain Grand Prix, Romain Grosjean. I'm going to give him an A+. I can't give him anything other than that, just because of how sentimental that kind of moment is, and how much in awe everybody was when you see that clip. And maybe he didn't have the greatest performance on the track, but I'm gonna totally overlook that and just think about how he's still with us here today. And he got out of that car and the incredible adrenaline rush that he had, and he's still doing well on the mend. Had surgery the other day as well, so seems to be stepping. It seems like things are going in the right direction for him. And I can't give. I couldn't be that cruel to not give Romain Grosjean an A+ just based off of that. Not the way he wanted to end his Formula One career, but definitely one we'll remember forever.
Yeah, obviously the wreck is the thing that everyone pays attention to, and just how he was able to survive it, and just everything coming after it has been remarkable, and absolutely is deserving of that A+, and there's no question about that. In terms of on-track performance this season, though, obviously Haas was disappointing this season, to say the least. He did have a couple solid performances, but overall the team just didn't really perform up to standard. So you got to give him the A+ because of the circumstances. But if we're looking at on track only, I would grade him as a C-.
So that's what you're giving him?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, you know what? I can't be hypocritical. I gave Ryan Newman, I believe it was a D grade earlier, and so I got to stay consistent.
I got to see what I gave Ryan Newman. That's a good point. I gave him a B-. No, I'm sticking with it. I'm going to be generous to Romain Grosjean. I'm going to stick with it. We move on, Kyle, to probably the most obvious one of all.
Yep.
A absolute F for Lewis Hamilton. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did for Chase Elliott. I think it was for Chase Elliott.
Yeah, you gave Chase Elliott the A++.
Exactly. That's what I'm giving Lewis Hamilton this season. I would give him an A+++.
Oh,
I think he deserves it. A record-breaking season for Lewis Hamilton. Just incredible that he's been able to outperform Valtteri Bottas for this season. Not only this season, but for the past 3 seasons on such a consistent basis. Broke the all-times win record, tied the most championships ever with Michael Schumacher, is on the verge of breaking the most laps led in Formula One, broke the most podiums in a season for Formula One this season. Like, the list goes on and on for this man's name in the history books. And this season, he just continued to add to his historic legacy in the sport. And we have talked about it. Like I said, even earlier in this episode, we have been very lucky to have witnessed something like this. We didn't get to see the Schumacher era in its heyday, really, but we got to see Lewis Hamilton in his heyday, and it's been quite the story to watch it unfold, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So an A+++ for Lewis Hamilton for me on his 2020 campaign.
Yeah, he gets all the pluses that you can basically add in. This season was remarkable, not only from the on-track stuff, of course, but the records as well. But when you look at just the raw performance this season, in the 16 Grand Prix that he was in, because, of course, we didn't get him in that 17th, his average finishing position was just under 1.9, which is the best average finishing position in an F1 season since 2002, when Michael Schumacher won the championship with an average finish of 1.4, having sat on the podium in every single race. So when you look at that consistency, it's just ridiculous. Like, there's no other way to put it. This man is simply otherworldly. He is one of the greatest of all time in the sport, and he's going to be going for number 8 next season.
Yeah, and also on Hamilton, the stuff he's done away from the racetrack as well is worthy of an A+ grade. So
like everything, man.
I mean, he's just been on fire this season, and a very great role model, a great spokesperson for the sport, for the Black Lives Matter movement, and his continuing efforts to stand up and say no to racism, which obviously we're fully behind. And we've seen a tremendous amount of support from fans and some of his competitors as well. And I'm very excited to see what Hamilton can do in it. Obviously, another record-breaking season, most likely. That is in 2021. And the last probably a predictable season in Formula One in terms of performance in some respects at the front of the grid. We'll see if Red Bull can take the challenge to him next season, but it's going to be very difficult to stop the unstoppable machine that really seems to be Lewis Hamilton. So a consensus A+++ on Lewis Hamilton's 2020 season. We move on to another fill-in driver here, Kyle.
Yes, I believe the final one.
I think it is. Yes, it is. The final kind of fill-in driver that was probably the craziest of them all, to be honest. This guy, as soon as you think he's away from the sport, he just comes right back. And Nico Hulkenberg, what a story he was this season. So I'll let you lead this off here, Kyle.
Yeah, Hulkenberg, I still can't believe we saw him not only back in the sport,
feels
but
like forever ago.
Force India / Racing Point as well. It does feel like forever ago. But to step back in the car in those situations and go out and get points finishes. Yes, we know Racing Point this season was the 3rd best car. But for somebody to go basically from off their couch in a weekend to step in and go out and outperform some legitimate teams in Formula One is nothing short of incredible. Where I grade him is interesting here because, again, the dilemma I've had comes up again of what do I really take into account here for a substitute driver versus somebody that was season long? Because what if Hulkenberg is season long and he only has like those couple of good races and everything else is maybe a little bit disappointing? Does that factor in or something like that? So for me, Hulkenberg, maybe it's a little bit low, but I'll go with a solid B+. I was very, very impressed by what he was able to do this season.
I gave him an A, just a solid A. I couldn't give him an A+. I think that's reserved to a select few of guys on the grid, but an A. He's very much deserving of it, in my opinion. He's got great credentials and was the ultimate replacement driver in Formula One. Just could step into the car so easily and perform it with the snap of the fingers. And he, went into a car that we obviously saw that was the 2019 Mercedes, essentially, and really compete, finish 3rd in qualifying at one point. Like, that is just ridiculous. Like, he out-qualified Max Verstappen in the British Grand Prix or the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, whatever one it was. I mean, that is spectacular speed. Like the fact that he got up that far. I know he didn't get to start a race, unfortunately. That's just unfortunate circumstances. But when he stepped in as well for the Eiffel GP at the Nürburgring, was on a mad mission to go from the back up through the field and got points out of it. Like, that's just incredible stuff. He showed his prowess more than any other guy on the grid, that he is deserving of an F1 seat next season. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. But I want to see him back in the sport. He's definitely talented, and I hope he gets that shot. He's very similar to me, in my eyes, to Sergio Perez, who's kind of been on the outs, hasn't gotten that quite big chance, but then now Perez is getting that chance. I hope Hulkenberg sees something close or similar to that in the near future, because, you know, he's getting up there a little bit in age. He's not going to have too much more left to go before he maybe hangs up his helmet on the F1 side of things and thinks about something else. But I think he's still got a little bit left in him, as proven this season, and I'm going to give him a solid A grade for the circumstances that he was under, going from the couch to the wheel of a cockpit that is going over 300 kilometers an hour. I think is pretty incredible, and he did quite the job this season for Racing Point in his two full races, 3 weekends, I guess, for Racing Point there. So nicely done for the Hulk and Nico Hulkenberg. We move on to a guy that's not going to be on the grid next season, Kyle, and Daniil Kvyat. Interesting one here, because he got a little bit outperformed by Pierre Gasly this season, but ended the season very strongly and was under the radar, kind of similar to Antonio Giovinazzi in some respects. And that's why I'm going to give Daniil Kvyat a solid B grade for his 2020 season. I think he did a solid job. Nothing that blew me out of the water, but at the same time, that's what we expect from Daniil Kvyat. We're not going to see something so great, but let's not forget he was on the verge of a podium at one point in time as well. He was very, very close to that. I think it was at the Imola, yes, and finished fourth in that one behind Daniel Ricciardo. So very close there for Kvyat to end up on the podium this season. I think he's deserving of a podium finish this season based off of the performance of AlphaTauri and how they had these one-off incredible races where, obviously as evident by Monza, but a solid B grade for the departing Daniil Kvyat for me.
Yeah, first off, I'm bumping Hulkenberg up to an A-. You convinced me. I was very close on the fence there, but you pushed me over there. I was being too harsh in that one. But for Daniil Kvyat, yeah, it's Pierre Gasly was just so good this season that it almost takes away from what Kvyat was able to do. But especially if you look at some of those final results of the season, Kvyat finished the season so strong. Was unfortunate to miss out on points at Abu Dhabi, but 7th in the Sakir Grand Prix. Before that, of course, as you mentioned, 4th at Imola, a couple races previous to that. So I'll give him a B- on this one. Unfortunate to see him out of the sport for at least right now. Probably going into the future as well, though. But a very strong season from both AlphaTauri drivers.
For sure. Very underappreciated element to this season. We had a lot of teams that scored in the 100 points, and we don't usually see that. So that just shows how competitive that midfield battle was. Exactly. And I think AlphaTauri did an admirable job. I know they finished 7th in the constructors, but in any other season, they would have been up in like 4th or 5th with the numbers that they really put up this season. So Daniil Kvyat unfortunately won't be with us in Formula One next season, but if it is his final time, I think he ended it very, very solidly for AlphaTauri. So in the Bs for both of us there for the Russian driver. We move on to the first Canadian of this list today. Nicholas Latifi, Kyle, an interesting one here. In his rookie season in Formula One, after finishing second in the F2 standings in 2019, makes the jump up to the big leagues in Formula One this season, partnering George Russell at Williams. Obviously, the slowest car on the grid, not getting a point the entire season. Was close a couple times, finished 11th, I think, twice this season. So not too bad for Latifi, but had his off moment. So what are you thinking here for a grade for the Canadian?
Yeah, it's just so tough to kind of grade the Williams drivers over these last handful of seasons, really, just because you don't really know how much of it is driver versus car. And we know the car is poor, but we just don't know if like the drivers necessarily are poor as well in certain respects, or if it is just the car and completely hindering the performance. And we've seen at times George Russell look very strong at times relative to Williams' expectations. And we never really saw that from Latifi. He was consistently last on the grid in terms of qualifying. He was good at keeping the car on track, only the 3 retirements, which is why he was able to get into some of those situations where just by the attrition of a race, he was able to grab some 11th place finishes. But in terms of performance on the whole, it just wasn't all that great season long. It's just kind of tough to really get a read on things, but I was very underwhelmed by him this season, so I'm just going to give him a D.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a D+ for his season. I follow a very similar
I almost talked myself into a D+ there, but I stuck to my guns.
Yeah, fair enough. It's tough because we want to see our Canadians do well in motorsports, and I think Latifi, I don't want to be too harsh on him, but at the same time, he was very underwhelming this season. Didn't really, wasn't really mentioned on the broadcast. It's kind of like the afterthought of the grid, to be honest, over there at Williams. Not because they are the last on the grid, but overall they got George Russell, an exciting prospect that is most likely going to take that next step here in the near future. We saw how well he did filling in at Mercedes for that one-off race. So I don't think Latifi is there yet. I don't know if he ever will get to that point. He's not probably as touted of a highly prospect as George Russell, Lando Norris, and even Alexander Albon to an extent. It's going to be tough for Latifi to try and break through in Formula One, I think. But hopefully the rookie jitters are behind him and he can go into a good sophomore season next season. But I think a D+ is pretty deserving for Latifi. Didn't really do too much. As you said, just took advantage of some people's misfortunes with retirements and crashes and just finished 11th a couple times. Didn't quite, and he never really made it to Q2, which is a disappointing thing. George Russell, we saw that for qualifying pace on the Saturday, made it to Q2 a couple of times, was on the verge of a Q3 appearance at one point as well. Latifi was never really there and was always out in Q1, it seems. So I don't even know if he made it out of Q1. I couldn't tell you that. I don't know if there's a stat on that. But if he didn't, I mean, that just shows you that the comparison between himself and George Russell. So a D for Kyle and a D+ for me for the Canadian. Hey, breaks my heart to say it, but underwhelming for Latifi this season. We move on to the first Ferrari driver of the grading of today's episode. Charles Leclerc, what a season this man had. What a roller coaster his F1 career has been. Starting off at Alfa Romeo, getting the jump up to Ferrari last season, winning up multiple races for the team when they were very competitive, and Ferrari took that big step back this season. Unfortunate, the power unit was just not there and the car just underperformed on a consistent basis. But Charles Leclerc did end up finishing 8th in the Drivers' Championship, miraculously. I don't know how he did it, but he ended up beating the likes of Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, Esteban Ocon, all guys that teams that are ahead of them in the Constructors' Championship. So very solid there from Leclerc. But at the same time, it is a pretty bad car. So you think Leclerc really brought that up when he compared it to Sebastian Vettel's performance this season is basically an understatement. So I'm going to give Charles Leclerc a solid A for his season. I can't give him an A+. I think that's just excluded for, the premier of the premier. But A for Charles Leclerc, just because the guy nailed it this season, was miraculous in qualifying, bringing it up to P4 a couple of times. I don't know how he did it with that power unit. And then, the race pace was never quite there. We expected that, but they found some qualifying trim speed that was really, really impressive. And Leclerc was the one that always got the edge on Vettel when it made it to Q3. So very impressive stuff for Charles Leclerc. So in his second year with Ferrari, I'm going to give him, under the circumstances with a very poor car behind him, or underneath him, I'm going to give him an A.
Yeah, I was very impressed by Leclerc this season. At times, he was a little overly aggressive, and that was him trying to basically make up for what was lost in the car. So I think that does need to factor in, but I was extremely impressed by him. As you mentioned, some miraculous qualifying performances, the fact that he finished second in the opening Grand Prix as well and picked up another podium along the way. And as you mentioned, finishing ahead of multiple talented drivers in better cars as well. Very strong season. I'm going to give him an A-, slightly lower than you, just because of some of those incidents that we talk about. Of course, the one that stands out most in our mind most recently being at Sakir, where he takes out Max Verstappen. But that's him trying to overcompensate for the car. Hopefully he has a better car and engine behind him going into next season, because he is clearly one of the most talented drivers on the grid.
Yeah, this is a future world champion here in the Ferrari. When he can get the vehicle behind him, Charles Leclerc is going to be a name that is going to be in the history books most likely, just based off of what we've seen in his very young F1 career, what we've seen coming up through the pipeline as well. This kid's really something special. And this season, I think, was probably the most evident of it all, to be honest, more than the past two seasons, just because of how poor that Ferrari is and how well he was able to compensate for that lack of power and performance with the car. So very impressive stuff from Charles Leclerc this season. We move on to Kevin Magnussen. Kyle, you want to start this one off?
Sure, yeah. Magnussen, just the 1 points finish as well, finishing 1 point behind Grosjean there. Grosjean 1 points finish in ninth. Magnussen, well, he got the same, just 10th. Just such a tough season for Haas overall. I just went consistent with it and gave him a C- as well. I think he's a better driver than a C- grade, but the car that he had this year, they weren't really able to outperform it. They just kind of performed at the level of the car this season. I'm excited to see his move to IMSA and Chip Ganassi, and hopefully down the road maybe a move to IndyCar with that same program. But this past season was pretty mediocre.
Yeah, I have the exact same grade. One of our very few similarities, but
is it our first similarity outside of the A+? I think so.
Yes, it is. It is. I have it written down. I kept track of it, and nice. I'm surprised, honestly, to this point that it has been this different. But I think this one, it's very straightforward for me. Was underwhelming a bit, and I mean, how can you not be in the Haas? It was kind of just a box on wheels, essentially, this season, and it's unfortunate. I'm sure Drive to Survival will give us some good clips, hopefully, with some Günther Steiner sound bites. But other than that, I think Haas's performance was pretty mediocre this season, and took a definite step back. And we'll see how they do with an entire rookie lineup next season. But for Kevin Magnussen, in his final season, full-time season in Formula One, C- grade is going to have to do it for me before he moves over to IMSA for Chip Ganassi next season. So we move on to the McLaren driver of Lando Norris. Fan favorite, one of my favorite drivers on the grid. Obviously, the inseparable, it seemed, until this season with duo between himself and Carlos Sainz. Unfortunately, that is not going to be the case next season with Sainz moving over to Ferrari. But Lando Norris really, really impressed me this season. I saw him last season, and I thought he was really, really solid as well. And I thought the sky's the limit. That's the
there we go. There we go.
The sky is the limit for Lando Norris, and I'm going to give him an A for his season. I think he was very impressive. I don't think he really put a foot wrong. He outqualified Sainz this season in terms of qualifying performance. I think he had less reliability. I think he had more reliability troubles than Sainz this season. So I think that's why the results are a little bit poor. He was so consistent. I think he's a star in the making, both on and off the track. Great personality, great racing driver. And I couldn't have been more impressed, really, with Lando Norris. Maybe the points weren't there to show it. I think that's maybe what's going to be misleading to him. But the fact that he only finished 8 points behind his compatriot there in Carlos Sainz, I think really shouldn't be looked at as too big of an issue. I know it's 2 points in the standings compared to Sainz in sixth to Lando in ninth, but getting that first career podium in the season opener at the Austrian Grand Prix, the fastest lap on that last lap as well. Like, he put himself in a position there where he could outpace Lewis Hamilton on that last lap to get his first career podium, was in contention multiple times this season. Sainz got obviously the podium there at Monza. That was second place compared to Lando's third. So maybe there's a little bit of bragging rights for Sainz on his departure from Lando there, but I think Lando was exceptional this season and well deserving of an A grade.
Yeah, I agree with a lot with what you said there. I went a little bit lower. I went with an A minus. An A was just a little too rich for me. I saved the A pluses and A's for the elite of the season. And the big thing for an A minus for me for Norris was the progression from last year to this year. The consistency this year was there, and the reliability last year was probably a big factor in that, of course. But Norris was very strong all year long, was matching Sainz all season long, and that was one of the main reasons why McLaren was able to go up and snag that third place in the constructors from Racing Point. It was the consistency of their drivers, and that was mainly because of Norris's progression this season. Very impressed with him. I cannot wait to see him go up against somebody like Daniel Ricciardo, who I think is one of the best on the grid, and really get a barometer of where both Carlos Sainz is at next season when he's up against Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris, of course, as well, when he's up against Daniel Ricciardo. It's going to be fascinating to see those two McLaren drivers from this year going into next season. Very impressed with both, but for right now, we're talking about Lando Norris, and he gets an A minus for me.
Yeah, I can totally understand where you're coming from with that in terms of your reasoning with the A's and your reasoning for that. But I think Lando is just – you never would think that this guy is one of the top talents of racing drivers in the world by just looking at him. And the fact that he just is able to go out there and be one of the fastest – I mean, this last weekend in Abu Dhabi was – incredibly tough. I can imagine for him. Last race with Sainz as his teammate, I'm sure that's a bit of emotions. They hide it pretty well over there at McLaren. I don't know if you got to watch the Unboxed episode today, but
I did not.
I certainly did, and it brought a tear to my eye. It's just the relationship between those two, and just to see how much Sainz has mentored Norris and how much Sainz has even learned from Norris a little bit has just been a great thing to watch over the past 2 seasons. And I think the next season for Norris is going to be the real test against Daniel Ricciardo, and I think he's going to live up to that challenge very nicely. And Norris is going to be someone to be reckoning with, I think, for a long time. And we're seeing a future star in the making in Lando Norris, in my opinion. I'm very high on this guy. Yeah, and I think he's going to be really solid. So an A and an A minus for Lando Norris's 2020 campaign. We move on to Esteban Ocon, Kyle. Very interesting one here. Underperformed against his teammate Daniel Ricciardo for the large majority of the season. But what are you thinking for a letter grade for the Frenchman?
Yeah, I was pretty high on Ocon coming into the season. The season off obviously affected his early season performances. Finished pretty strongly, I guess you could say. But overall on the season, a big gap between him and Daniel Ricciardo. And just overall was a little bit disappointed in him there. So I still went with a B minus. I think he still showed enough flashes to still get that, given the circumstances of being completely out of the sport and not racing for a season, coming back in cold against somebody the caliber of Ricciardo. Next season, I expect a lot more from him. But I think he was serviceable this season with Renault. Needs to make the step up when they make the switch over to Alpine. So I gave him just a solid B minus.
I was a bit harsh on Ocon here.
Okay.
I'm going to be the harsher of the two. I give him a C minus this season. I was pretty disappointed, to say the least, on Esteban Ocon's season. I thought this kid was really something. Not to say that he isn't anymore, but I think this season was just really poor compared to what we saw. The only reason he's not in the D's is just because of that podium at the end. I was, in comparison to Ricciardo, I thought they would be a really good match, and it just did not come to fruition. And I think the thing that really puts me on a lower end for some of these Formula One guys is that they have practice, they have qualifying, so they should be familiar with the car as the season rolls along. It shouldn't take that long for them to adjust to get back into the car. And to that point where you say he's been out of the car for a year, I think Nico Hulkenberg is the perfect example of a guy that was outside of the car and then jumps right back in and again gets points finishes and gets is solid.
The racing points also much better than the Renault, though.
But at the same time, I don't think Ocon, if he comes into that same role as Hulkenberg, he does the same thing as what he did. So I think for Ocon, a bit disappointing for me. So C minus is well deserving in my opinion. I can see where you're coming from, but I was really looking forward to Ocon back in the sport this season. After watching him against Perez, I thought they were very similar in speed and talent. And I think Ocon maybe took a little bit of a step backwards this season in terms of his progression. But at the same time, that is a little bit understandable with the year off. I think he's just let me down a little bit more than I anticipated. So a C- grade for Ocon's season. So yeah, that's probably the one where I'm the lowest on. Hey, I think that's
so.
where we differ the most.
I kind of expected that
me
going
being
in,
the harshest
though.
on one.
I kind of expected that going in,
I made my intentions pretty clear coming into this.
Yeah,
so.
you've been pretty harsh on Ocon all year long, so I kind of expected that lower grade, and I've maybe been a little bit more lenient on him. So I was kind of expecting the big discrepancy the opposite way than usual before, but this next one I feel like is pretty obvious as well.
Yeah, you can take this one. This is your guy. This is a guy that you've been talking about nonstop really this season, and rightfully so.
It's my boy, Sergio Perez. What a season he had this year to race so consistently, to the point where the only non-points finishes he had this season was the engine expiring at Bahrain and then the engine expiring at Abu Dhabi is remarkable. The fact that he finished fourth in Drivers' Championship, missing 2 races, is incredible. And then, of course, finishing off the season second at Turkey and then first at Sakir. For me, this is an easy one. A+ for me. He sets himself up so well going into the future here, making the move as we expect to Red Bull now. If you said a year ago that Sergio Perez would, after the 2020 season, be racing for Red Bull going into 2021, I think most people would have laughed at you, but that's just how good he was this year.
It's a no-brainer. It's an A+ for Sergio Perez. Yeah, this is next level caliber driving from the Mexican driver this season. This is I thought Perez has been very good. I don't know. I didn't realize how good he was really until this season. I think this was the perfect example, the breakout season that we've kind of been waiting for Sergio Perez, and what a time to do it, to get the Red Bull seat in all likelihood for next season. And that win is just probably the icing on the cake for me, going from spin to win, last to first. I mean, and I know it was a chaotic race, but at the same time, to pass that many cars without really much challenge and then win the race by 10+ seconds.
It's not like he lucked into having the lead and then drove away from the field when he had the clean air. He had to battle his way back from that last place, past multiple cars over that race to get into the position where he would eventually inherit the lead. It's not like this was some fluke situation. He had one of the drivers of the year getting that win. And even though he didn't necessarily overtake for the lead like you would normally see in a race, I think that you can't take away from the result over the season.
That's an understatement, hey?
So, yeah.
Didn't take the lead in the most normal fashion.
That's putting it lightly.
Calamity of errors for that to happen.
But yeah, Sergio Perez, my boy, I can't wait to see him at Red Bull next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. So an A+ for both of us there. Consensus amongst everybody basically there for Sergio Perez.
I would like to have a stern conversation with anybody that wouldn't give him an A+.
Yeah, may as well. I'll let you lead that charge though, because this has been I think this has probably been the guy that you've been the most high on this season, I'd say. Like
on the Formula One side, yeah.
Yeah, I think not to say that I'm not, but you've definitely made your opinions known. Very similar to me in my disappointment.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Perez since I think it was the 2012 season where he really broke out with Sauber. I was loosely following Formula One back then, and I remember seeing him chase down Alonso at Malaysia there, and just went off and wasn't able to go and pass him for the win. But since then, I've always had him in the back of my mind as a really talented driver that needed an opportunity. He got that this year, lost his seat for some controversial reasons, I guess I'll say, and then goes out and gets arguably an upgrade there with Red Bull. So I can't wait to see what he does next year.
I don't think he'll be complaining if he's winning races on a regular basis.
No, I don't think anyone
it's going to be No. So Sergio Perez gets a rightful A+ for his 2020 season. We move on to Kimi Raikkonen, the elder statesman of the sport, and that's by some margin now.
Well, not anymore because Alonso's
Kimi Raikkonen,
back.
Well, but he is the most experienced driver in F1 history.
The amount of races, yes. Age, less so now.
Okay, fair enough. But for the 2020 season, at least, he was the elder statesman of the sport by quite some margin. So for Kimi Raikkonen, as we talked about with Antonio Giovinazzi, Alfa Romeo a little bit disappointing this season, and Raikkonen got out qualified by Giovinazzi as well. Race pace made up for it though, so I'm going to give him the same grade I gave Giovinazzi, a B-. I can't give one higher than the other. They were very comparable this season for me. I think Kimi Raikkonen, I love the guy, very soft, very well spoken when he does speak, and he just provides some of the greatest sound bites you'll ever hear. But his on-track performance is very, very good as well, and his race pace. I mean, he beat the Ferraris in the final race of the season. Like, he was right in the mix. Like, he was better than the Ferraris, the team that he left. Like, what a weird feeling that must be for him this season, racing them on a very regular and consistent basis. But a B-, I think, is middle of the road. Kimi Raikkonen didn't wow me away, didn't disappoint me. He just kind of met my expectations. So a B- is what I gave the Finnish driver.
Yeah, seeing Raikkonen and Giovinazzi finish on 4 points each is both fitting and slightly misleading as well, because Raikkonen, while they were pretty close on qualifying pace, Giovinazzi had a little bit of an edge there. In terms of the race pace, it was Raikkonen for much of the season, and to the point where he only had one retirement this year that came in the first race of the season. So finishing the season, 16 straight finishes, which is very, very impressive to say. For Raikkonen, I went slightly higher than Giovinazzi. I almost put them as the same, but I bumped Raikkonen up to a B- just because of that racecraft.
Fair enough. I probably could have given Giovinazzi a little bit of a harsher grade earlier on, but
I think it's very fair to say they're the same, though. Like, it was barely splitting hairs. I'm looking at my list. I'm like, okay, I've only got a couple of B- here. Oh, what the hell? I'll give it to Raikkonen.
Yeah, I can't blame you there, to be honest. Yeah, very solid from Alfa Romeo, just in terms of the compatibility
between the two drivers and what they bring. Power unit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we move on to a big one here, Kyle. Daniil Ricciardo, as you probably one of the most talented drivers on the grid, made the big switch to Renault 2 seasons ago from Red Bull, making a bet on himself kind of move here that Renault is going to improve and that this is his team, that he could be he could be the big man over there. And now he's already leaving, which is crazy to say, going to McLaren next season, replacing Carlos Sainz and partnering with Lando Norris. But he finally got that podium for Renault this season, did Daniil Ricciardo, and multiple at that. And Daniil Ricciardo really impressed me this season, took that next step. Renault took that next step forward a little bit for him this season, made that midfield battle a little bit closer, finished only 6 points off of fourth in the championship standings as well. I think Daniil Ricciardo is very deserving of I think him and Lando Norris are going to be the perfect combination next season. I gave him the same grade I did with Norris, an A for Daniil Ricciardo's season, getting the podium and then making Cyril a bit Cyril. I'm just going to say Cyril, unbeatable. Hit that tattoo, which I don't even know if he's gotten yet, but I'm sure at some point in time.
I mean, technically he needs 3 now, because Ricciardo got 2 and then Ocon got second as well. So
yeah, I'll have to talk to Cyril about that. I can't say his last name for the life of me, but I'll give Cyril a quick DM and see if he's gotten that tattoo. We'll talk about that next episode. I think I'll get a response in very timely fashion. But yeah, Daniil Ricciardo gets an A for me for his 2020 season.
Yeah, well, make it 3 straight, because I'm also giving Ricciardo an A. I saved the A's and A pluses for the elite of the elite.
Holy
Ricciardo,
smokes.
I think, deserved it this season. Very, very impressive rebound season for Ricciardo with Renault there, finishing 5th in the Drivers' Championship, as you mentioned there. Just a few points off of Perez, who, of course, did miss a couple of races. But Ricciardo was extremely impressed with, especially kind of the latter half of the season, where he was consistently in solid points positions. I think he finished off his tenure at Renault very strongly. I still really like the move to McLaren, especially with the Mercedes power unit there. And yeah, as you mentioned, Norris Ricciardo is going to be one of the best driver pairings on the grid, and I cannot wait to see that on track
in F1
Australia.
history. In F1 history, I'll say that right now. I think it's going to be
that might be a little rich for me right now, but we'll see.
Yeah. The personalities and the racing. Is
the personalities,
absolutely insane.
But like.
That's what I mean. You have to take everything into consideration. That's what I mean. Like it doesn't just stop on the track. There is an element of off-track stuff that really brings into the fan part of things that we get to see on social media. Like we better see a no strings attached part 2 next season. I will say that for McLaren. But Daniel Ricciardo, very well deserved of an A grade there for his last season with Renault. Wow, what an interesting one we got up here next, Kyle. George Russell, eh? Man, I mean, I don't know honestly what to give him right now. I'm still up in the air on what to give the British driver. I mean, you obviously think to the Sakir Grand Prix. That's the only thing that you really are gonna remember George Russell's 2020 season of. But rightfully so. I mean, he did step into the World Championship winning car and almost win the race, and should have won the race, to be honest. But at Williams, had a couple of mistakes here and there. Had some reliability problems, but also mistakes on his end behind the wheel. Obviously, that big one behind the safety car that we think of, where he just spun out and crashed the car when he was just going to unlap himself. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And I'm going to give George Russell – I'm going to give him an A-. I'm going to give him an A-. I can't give him an A. I can't give him the Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris kind of number. But for the Sakir Grand Prix, he gets an A+ for that weekend, just for his mentality, stepping into a car he doesn't fit into and getting second in qualifying by 0.026, if I'm not mistaken, seconds.
I think so, yeah.
And George Russell was leading the race off the start, has led the fourth most laps of the season, miraculously as well, after Verstappen's win there at the end of the season. So falls back to fourth in that statistic. But George Russell, what a season for the young man. Second season in Formula One. Impressed me a lot with just the caliber of driver he is going into that Mercedes and just stepping up to the plate. But that mistake that he made, was it Mugello or
Imola? I believe it was.
And it was Imola. I did a Ricardo graphic on that, so then it would have been that one. That would bring me down a letter grade. I would have given him an A just based off of that race with Mercedes alone, but that mistake really brought me down a letter grade there. So A- for George Russell.
Yeah, you have to look at the season as a whole and not just focus on the Sakir weekend, which if you just focus on that weekend, you got to give him like the A+ grade. But when you look at the season as a whole here, there were some missed opportunities for George Russell. Obviously, the Imola incident is the one that really stands out, but there were a couple of chances that he had for some points and wasn't able to break through on them. I believe it was Mugello where he had a chance to pass for Sebastian Vettel for 10th there and wasn't able to do so in the closing laps after
it was close.
After a safety car there.
There.
So there was a couple situations like that over the season, but still, the raw pace that he shows is remarkable, and he finally had an opportunity to show it in Formula One at Sakir. So for me, just because the Williams effort had a couple of lowlights in there, a B+ for me, but this guy is special, and we'll be seeing him race for world championships in no time.
Absolutely. I can agree with that. It's just a nip and tuck there. A-, B+. I think it's very much in the same ballpark there. So solid effort from George Russell this season, and I hope we see him in 2022 in a Mercedes car. That's all I can say. I really want that to happen, and oh man, what I wouldn't give to have that next season. But nonetheless, George Russell, very solid effort. For Williams, had a couple of issues, like we said, but that Sakir Grand Prix is going to stick in a lot of people's minds for a year now until hopefully he gets a Mercedes ride in 2022 there. But we'll move on from George Russell because we talked about him a lot over the past couple of weeks. But we move into a bit more of an underrated guy, but he got the results very much so on a regular basis, and that is the one Carlos Sainz. So, Kyle, you want to take this one?
Yeah, very, very similar season to what Lando Norris had. Maybe had some higher points there, obviously finishing second and nearly winning in Monza. But once again, a very consistent season from the smooth operator. A great finish to the season.
Smooth operator.
That's for sure getting clipped. But no, just a spectacular end of the season, getting consistent, significant points. Probably should have ended up on the podium if not for some VSC shenanigans, I guess you could say, at Sakir. Another excellent effort with McLaren here. I can't I hope Ferrari gets their you-know-what together so that we can see Carlos Sainz legitimately contend for wins going into the future here. Because I think that he is developed to the point where he is a driver that is deserving of that kind of seat. Once again, I'll give him the same grade as Lando Norris. I'll give him the A- there. I could be convinced, honestly, after you talk, to bump him up to an A. But once again, very impressed with Carlos Sainz this year.
I forgot to do the thing for Lando Norris. It's Friday then.
Hey.
Saturday, Sunday, what? It's Friday then. I had to do that for him. That was an incredible sound clip. But for the smooth operator, Carlos Sainz, I'm giving him the same grade I gave Lando Norris, an A. In his last season with McLaren, they drug that car up to third in the Constructors' Championship, and that needs to be recognized in the largest extent that it can be. Carlos Sainz, going to miss him at McLaren, to be honest. I think he suits that team perfectly. And not to say that Daniel Ricciardo won't be an admirable replacement, but Carlos Sainz just seemed like he fit really well there. And this is going to be his fourth team in Formula One already in his very young career, which is crazy to say. But he's excelled in each place that he's gone to, and I can only imagine that it's going to get better at Ferrari when they get that car hopefully turned around sooner rather than later. But his season as a whole, exceptional. I think he was just right there with Lando Norris. Got out qualified on him, but I think he was a little bit stronger in the race pace, so then that helps compensate for the kind of disparity between the two. Lando was better on the Saturdays, but then I think Sainz was a little bit more consistent on the Sundays, so I give him an equal grade in terms of that. And gonna miss him in the orange overalls next season, or I guess the blue overalls. They don't even wear orange. But for his last season with McLaren, I mean, I love this guy. I think the last few seasons you've got to see him both on and off the track, the personality, and that's a huge part in how I grade these guys. I think I want to see some fun guys do well, and Carlos Sainz is definitely one of those guys I really want to see do well in the future of his Formula One career. So very, very solid for Carlos Sainz, giving him an A grade on his final season with McLaren. So yeah, we move into the final three.
Yes.
Kyle.
Three very different ones, I gotta say.
I definitely have that written down right now as my grade as well. Very different in terms of how I want to go about this. So we start off with the last Canadian driver on the F1 grid in Lance Stroll. Obviously, got that pole in the Turkish Grand Prix in miraculous, spectacular, unbelievable fashion. Like, there's not enough adjectives to describe how well that performance was in the wet in Turkey on the slickest racetrack you're ever going to see probably in Formula One. In the rain, nonetheless, like the conditions were just incredible. And the fact that he beat Max Verstappen, who was the highly touted favorite going into that final run in qualifying, how could he not be? He led every single practice and qualifying session up to that point, and Lance Stroll steals it from him on the last lap by a genius strategy from Racing Point first off, but also the talent of Lance Stroll, which has been proven in the wet conditions. What a drive that was, but he had some ups and downs this season. He wrecked unceremoniously on some occasions. You think back to Mugello, and that kind of really just kind of spun him off course there for what seemed to be a very solid season up to that point. Had a couple of consecutive DNFs finishes after that, and never really got that momentum going until that final stretch of the season when he got that podium. 2 podiums on the season for Lance Stroll. So very, very solid effort. Just had some misfortune, made a couple mistakes here and there in practice as well. Got into it, I think it was with Verstappen at the Portuguese Grand Prix. So have to take that into consideration as well. But for me, Lance Stroll did enough to give me a B+ grade for his season. 2 podiums, a pole position, broke or tied some records, broke some records, wrote his name in the history book essentially. And I think a solid grade for him. He wasn't quite on that Perez level this season as kind of shown in the championship standings. Missed a race due to COVID as well. So been an up and down season for Lance Stroll, but I'm going to give him a B+. I probably could give him an A-. I'll hear that argument for sure, but a B+ for the Canadian.
Yeah, Lance Stroll's season is so fascinating to look at because if you look at basically the first half of the season up until that Mugello accident, you're probably looking at like an A- season for him. He was very strong to start the year. After the Mugello incident, you have a couple more DNFs, you have a missed race because of COVID, and only a couple mediocre points finishes and then the podium. So very different seasons. Looking at the first half and the second half, I'd probably give the first half like an A-, the second half probably like a C or C-. So when you average it out, I'll give him a B. He showed quite a bit of flashes this season, but also had quite a bit of lowlights as well. Next year is going to be massive for him because he needs to show that it was the right decision for Racing Point / Aston Martin to keep him in the seat rather than retain Sergio Perez alongside Sebastian Vettel. That's going to be a tough ask, but it's something that he needs to start doing at this point of his career. And I think that he's on pace, given this season and the progression and his age as well, that he might be able to do so.
Yeah, I could agree with that. When he first made the jump over to Racing Point, replacing Esteban Ocon, we thought, obviously his dad investing in the company, becoming basically the owner of it, it just seemed like he was just getting that ride based off of money and not talent. But I think he's starting to take those steps where he's trying to disprove those haters wrong. And this season, I think, was a great step in that right direction. Hopefully, he can continue that into next season. Going to have a tough challenge against Sebastian Vettel, who was basically unmotivated for the majority of this season, knowing this would be his last season in Formula One. Or not Formula One, for Ferrari, excuse me. But to partner with Lance Stroll next season, he's going to have a great mentor there, like he did with Sergio Perez. Sebastian Vettel is going to be a great comparable to him, and I'm very, very excited to see what the Canadian driver can do. I'm excited to see a German versus a Canadian. I am so enticed by that matchup. You cannot understand it. Obviously, being half German, it makes sense, but very, very excited for that. But Lance Stroll, I think, in the Bs for sure for this season. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with it. I thought you maybe go with A-, but I think a B grade is probably the most consistent across the board with like just being in that B category.
Yeah, and just finally on Stroll here, something that people forget a lot is his age, because he came into Formula One so young. He made the jump straight from, I believe it was F3 straight to that Williams seat after dominating in that championship, and did so at such a young age that people forget that he's still only 22. He's multiple months younger than George Russell. Like, people forget kind of the ages of these guys when they come into the sport. He's 2 years younger than Esteban Ocon, which is why I still have a lot of faith in Lance Stroll to become a very solid to high-end driver in Formula One, because at his age, at 22, we've seen him this season show some very, very strong flashes. Next year is going to be a huge season for him, going up against somebody like Sebastian Vettel, having the Aston Martin name tag with it as well now. Big season for him. And of course, the team having dropped Sergio Perez to retain him alongside Vettel as well. So a very strong season, I think, for Lance Stroll, the season that he needed to have in the progression of his career, but he's got to take those steps going into next year.
Yep. And he was definitely the best Canadian on the grid for Formula One this past season, undoubtedly. So I had to mention that as well. Just got to drive that home that Lance Stroll was definitely one of the best Canadian motorsports drivers across the board in the motorsports world.
I was going to say,
very solid
Canadian Driver of the Year, ? Tease for Monday's episode.
Oh, we'll tease that a little bit later on. But a nice little spoiler there.
I figured I'd tuck it in a little bit.
Little nice if you're listening still at this point in the episode. You got a little bit of a tease, so stay tuned for more on that front. Final two, Kyle.
Yes.
Final two. We start off with Max Verstappen before getting into the one and only Sebastian Vettel. Max Verstappen, though, what a season he has had. Ended it on a high with a win in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, getting pole first off in the qualifying session, and then outpacing the Mercedes basically the entire weekend in the race as well. So, I mean, I'm going to give Max Verstappen an A+ from this season. The fact that he was right there with Bottas at the end of the season, had reliability issues, easy for me to say, and I think this was the most mature Max Verstappen we had seen so far in Formula One. He didn't make many mistakes, and if any, really, I think this was such a great season for him. He got taken out in some instances. You think back to Mugello, it was when he had the great start, would have maybe gotten up to first, but then he had a power issue and then he crashes in the next corner and he gets taken out. Like, there's nothing he can do about that, right? And then you think back to Monza, got a reliability issue there. He retires from the Grand Prix. The Sakira Grand Prix gets taken out basically with nothing of his own doing, was in prime position there to get in contention for a win based off of the practice speeds and the qualifying pace that he had, was right there with the Mercedes. Verstappen's season was nothing short of spectacular, so I can't hear an argument other than an A+ really for me. He was on Hamilton's level, in my opinion, in terms of how consistent he was always on the podium when he was able to race. The only I could hear an argument maybe just from that Turkish Grand Prix where he was a bit over eager at points and times, where he spun out next to Perez, was just trying too hard at some points, just was maybe show that a little bit in terms of mistakes there for Verstappen. But that's the only instance where I can think of that it was his fault, really. I think he just started off the season with the retirement in the Austrian Grand Prix. Terrible for him there. Probably was in contention for a win there as well, just based off of Red Bull's pace in that race when we saw Albon going up to almost challenge for a win there before the unfortunate circumstances with Hamilton. But Verstappen, in the long of things there, Verstappen gets an A+.
I went with an A.
There you go again. Mr. Pessimistic. Oh, my God. Kyle, this is the same thing as Harvick.
For me, an A+ season for Red Bull this year and for Max Verstappen would have been second in the Drivers' Championship, and he just barely missed out on it. You do bring up Turkey as well. That was one of the things that I was going to bring up as well. The fact that he was mature all season, but that race should have been his. And he just made too many mistakes on that race day that cost him from a really solid points haul, and one that if he didn't make the mistakes that he did, might have gone up and snagged that second in the Drivers' Championship as well, because, of course, Valtteri Bottas had such a brutal weekend that he finished fourth. Verstappen finished sixth. He probably should have been up on the podium, if not winning that race.
14th for Bottas there, 14th.
Yes, what did I say?
Fourth.
Oh, sorry. I meant 14th. I apologize. Maybe I'm being a little too stingy on it, but I feel like an A+ for third in the Drivers' Championship is a little too much for Verstappen and for Red Bull. So it's a very strong A.
I'm going to argue with you on this, because I want you to convert this to an A+. The 70th anniversary Grand Prix, he beat them on pace. Nobody did that this season. That's one race, though. Nobody did that this season, though. Nobody beat the Mercedes
had the
straight
ability
up on space
to do it.
Alex Albon didn't. He's in the same car.
Of course.
I think he was the only guy that took it to Mercedes this season. The 70th anniversary Grand Prix is one of
He was the only one
highlights
that had
of the
the ability to do it, and that's why he still gets an A.
At least he did it. I think that's an A+ season. If he doesn't execute on that, then I hear an A.
If he did it more consistently, then yes, absolutely an A+. But you're talking about one race.
But he couldn't do it on a consistent enough basis, though. Mercedes was just too good.
Yeah, he didn't do it on a consistent enough basis, which is why he gets an A, not an A+. An A+ is reserved for the best of the year. And for me, that was Lewis Hamilton, obviously, for winning the World Championship, his 7th, and all the records that came with it. It was Sergio Perez because of the fashion that he was able to dominate relative to expectation in the Racing Point to finish 4th in the championship despite missing 2 races. And it was Pierre Gasly for me because he was able to be so consistent given the circumstances of his year and to win a race. For me, I needed to see just a little bit more from Max Verstappen to give him an A+.
I'm shocked. I'm stunned. I'm blown away, Kyle. I can't believe it.
Wasn't an A+ season for me.
Oh my God. All right. Well, as always, I respect your opinion, but this one I definitely disagree with. At least you give him an A. Oh man. All right. Well, that's a great way to segue into the last grade of the season. This is it. What a fun ride the 2020 season was, but it wasn't that fun for Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, this is a tough one because I want to see Vettel do well, but it started off when he was announced that he's not returning to Ferrari before the season even began. And with that storyline hanging over his head, he had nothing really to race for this season, especially when we look at Ferrari's pace. He got at least that podium for the Turkish Grand Prix. That's the one highlight, the one saving grace for Sebastian Vettel. But besides that, I didn't see anything for Sebastian Vettel this season. And as cruel as it is, this one I'm going to give him a D plus for his season. I can't give him anything higher than that in comparison to when I saw from Charles Leclerc and how brilliantly he drove this season, getting 98 points to Sebastian Vettel's 33. I mean, that's just light years ahead in terms of F1 points. And it pains me to say it because I do love Sebastian Vettel, but it's just so unfortunate how he's going out with Ferrari, how it's all ending for him here. And the performance on the track kind of just proved that he was disinterested. Ferrari messed up the strategy on him multiple times. They just kind of gave him the butt end of the stick. And it's just not the way I wanted him to end his Ferrari tenure. He took a big risk going there, didn't get the world championship that he ultimately wanted over there with his boyhood team that he always wanted to be with, obviously for Michael Schumacher being his idol. Sebastian Vettel gets a D+. I hate to do that to him, but I can't give him anything higher.
Yeah, he was significantly beaten by his teammate. Leclerc almost finished exactly with 3 times the amount of points that Vettel had. You look at the one highlight of the season, obviously being the podium at Turkey, but outside of that, it was a really, really rough season, obviously for Ferrari as a whole, but for Vettel as well. You could see that he was disinterested. You could see that the team didn't really care about his performance. It was all about Leclerc's. And it was just kind of a throwaway season going into next year and hope to rejuvenate things with Aston Martin. So for me, it's a D season. It's an F season for Ferrari as a whole. But for Vettel himself, I'll give a D just because you look at the way that some of the other drivers on the grid went out this season, and it was a very different experience for them versus Sebastian Vettel. And just too many lowlights for me, finishing the season with 3 straight non-points finishes after getting the podium at Turkey as well. Not the way that you would have hoped for Sebastian Vettel's career at Ferrari to come to an end. It just sucks all around. Nobody wanted it to end this way. But hopefully we can see things reignite at Aston Martin.
Disappointing way to end the grading, I have to say. Disappointing.
It sucks.
Disappointing way to end the everything. That sucks. Like, why does Vettel have to be the last name? But yeah, that's it. That's the grades for every single driver that drove in Formula One this season in a race, and definitely a lot different than what I actually thought it was going to be. How many comparisons do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 comparisons out of 23 guys. Very interesting. We were a couple off, like just one little minus or plus, but for the large part, we had a bit of a difference of opinion in a lot of these. So very nice to have these discussions as always, Kyle. Man, that really puts a bow on the 2020 season. That's usually the kind of
almost
marking
does.
of the end.
We got one more.
Oh, I was getting to it. Just let me give it. Give it a minute. But as Kyle teased there, for our Monday episode, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special one as we are going to be having an award show for the 2020 season. Very excited about this one. We've got a whole bunch of different categories that we've got on deck for you. Just to tease a couple, we've got the best signing coming into this season, the Canadian driver of the season, as Kyle teased a little bit earlier as well, team of the year, obviously the race of the year, even have maybe a best paint scheme of the year as well. We've got to throw in the looks for the award show as well. Got to dress up nice in terms of getting the paint schemes all looking flashy and everything. So can't do it without that. We've got I believe 14 categories right now. That's most likely going to be the final total that we've got. Very happy with what we have. We have some nominations as well already, but we're not going to tease those just yet. You've got to go over to our social media pages to see what we've got for that. So we've got some graphics coming up made by Kyle himself that are going to show our nominees for the categories in time for Monday's episode. And we're going to release those on our Twitter and Instagram at The Green Flag on Insta, and then at The Green Flag Pod on Twitter. Going to be very exciting. And you guys will have the chance to vote as well on your opinions for the season as well. Who do you think should get the award? And we'll both have our own opinions for our awards as well. So we're not going to be so much copy and paste. It's going to be much of our opinions, but looking at the nominations, we definitely have some crossover, but we have some variety as well, which is very, very exciting. So anything else you want to add in terms of teasing the kind of like our big finale for the 2020 season?
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to this one. I think it's the perfect way to kind of culminate the season. We don't have any like the speed performance awards or anything like that anymore. So we're jumping in and we're making our own.
That's a throwback, hey?
I know, right? Hey, that's a throwback. When I was watching a couple of those videos last night. But yeah, so basically on both of our Twitter and Instagram, you'll be able to see the nominees, but then you'll also be able to vote on who do you think should be the winner of said award. And you can pick from the nominees or you can go off the board. You can basically go with whatever you think is the correct choice for each of the awards. So you can go on Twitter. There'll be polls there for you underneath each of the graphics. And then on Instagram, you can just comment on each of the posts. But I'm definitely looking forward to the award show. It's just like the perfect way to as you said, put the bow on the 2020 season.
Yeah, it's been one heck of a ride.
No kidding.
I know I say that a lot, but it's just a great way to kind of. This season has been unlike any other, and I think it's rightful that we really take a look back on the best moments and some of the biggest disappointments as well. It's not all going to be positive. We have to show off some of the lowlights as well, making sure that
unfortunate
we're doing that
for
as
you.
well.
Yeah.
Making our due diligence on that. Thanks for that, Kyle. We could have stayed all positive, but when I opened up the Google Sheet, we have a disappointment category, and we all know whose name's going to end up in Kyle's column with that one. But that's a little tease for that category. But I'm very, very excited for this first award show that we're going to be hosting, at least for myself. I'm very excited to kind of get that out of the way on Monday. You probably have. You've done so many damn on-air stuff over the years. Yes, you have. You've hosted the game show. I mean, that's
okay. Yeah,
that's got to be something similar.
I guess so.
That's similar. But yeah, I'm very excited. So make sure to stay tuned to our social media channels. We'll have those in the link of the description to the YouTube channel, to the YouTube video. And yeah, what a crazy year it's been, and we get to all recap that all and reminisce and really hand out the awards. It's all going to be virtual. Unfortunately for these guys who ever do win these categories, we don't have a trophy for you or anything or a medal. Maybe we'll give you a sticker, a participation sticker or something like that. But yeah, very, very excited with what's going on around the turn here on the green flag. So any final thoughts here before we wrap up today's episode, Kyle?
Yeah, just a jam-packed one with our driver grades, of course, and then one of the biggest bombshells of the silly season, I guess you would say. Just a fun way to end off the year. We've got obviously the big one coming up on Monday with the award show, but I think maybe one more episode before the year's up. Yeah,
we'll take a week off for Christmas. Yeah, and just stay at home with the family and stuff. Obviously, if we were to record on our usual Thursday episode, that would be Christmas Eve next week. So we're going to take a break after that one, but we'll be back strong at some point, maybe later this year after Monday's episode, or if not, we'll come back in the new year and catch you up on all the news that's going to happen. I'm sure there's going to be tons of it because it doesn't stop, but very, very excited. So, wow. Can't believe we're near the end of 2020, Kyle. What a ride. What a year.
No kidding.
And yeah, the Monday one is going to be must watch, much listen. So very, very excited for what's in store here at the Green Flag. So I think that does it for this episode. Grading, what a entertainment that was.
Grading for the year all done. I can put the red pen away.
Yeah, like the teachers there, our marks are in. It's finalized. That's it. We're not going to be going back and giving anybody extra credit or anything. They can't do anything like that. So that's it. It's finalized. If you like your grade, you can always email us, Formula One drivers. If you're not happy with it, we can discuss it at length. As our profs usually like to say, that we can always argue for our grade and see what you are worthy of. But yeah. Great episode today. Silly season bombshell with Formula One with Yuki Tsunoda coming obviously over to AlphaTauri. But then the big one, Sergio Perez anticipating to be the replacement of Alexander Albon at Red Bull next season. So we'll talk about that. We'll confirm it on Monday if it does happen tomorrow. And then we'll get into the award show right away on Monday's edition of the show. But for this one, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. We'll talk to you Monday where we will discuss the awards for the 2020 motorsport season. Stay safe, everybody.